my own Instagram, but that's
All right,
okay.
we're live on both X's.
All right, now we've got it figured out.
And we're also going to be live on Our Honor Facebook right now. No, for some reason that's not working. Yes, we're live on all of them now. Wonderful.
Yeah.
We are live in effect. It's going to be great.
Except for my own personal Instagram, we're not live on there. But
you're not.
Okay.
We're not live on Crystal's Instagram. That's okay. Isn't it private anyway?
No, it's not. It's very public.
You have it set to public?
Yeah.
Wow, you're so bold. You're such a.
I know.
You're so brave.
I force my opinions onto other people.
You're so strong.
Yeah.
That's
why are we dismissing this? We're live on only 2 channels. Is that like a quality measurement that if you're live on only 2 channels, it's already not good enough? Should we be live on?
Right
is
now,
it like one of those superstitious odd or even?
Right now, we should be live on 8 different channels. 9.
I think 9, 2.
There's
4,
a limit,
6,
and
8, 9. 9. I was an English major, not a. You were the one who did a science. You guys are supposed to be the mathematicians.
Yeah.
So it needs to be a perfect square, otherwise it's not good enough.
That's it. 3 times 3 is 9. All right. So today we're going to be talking about Crystal's interesting interaction with John Cullen, or he calls himself John Edgar Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover, which I think is fun. But John Cullen, he has a podcast. He's beloved. He talks about. I would call him a conspiracy theorist, but sometimes some of those things are fun, and that's not to say that conspiracy theories aren't based on some shreds of truth and evidence. It's interesting stuff to listen to if you keep an open mind.
We're all about questioning authority, right?
Yes, exactly. I say keep a critical mind, audi alterum partem as well. I like to hear the other side.
And here's the thing. I feel like scientists, veterinarians, doctors, we usually stay away from conspiracy theorists because we're so worried about being looped in with them. And so this creates this divide, this polarizing situation where we can't talk to each other. And you have people who are saying, ivermectin is the cure to COVID and all of these things, and nobody is having a real discussion about it. You have doctors calling it horse dewormer when it's not horse dewormer.
What is it? You're a vet.
Ivermectin is a dewormer that is actually used in human beings.
Okay, but still a dewormer.
And it has, dewormers have a bunch of different properties and can work on a variety of different things. And maybe who's to say that the reason a lot of people get sick from COVID or more sick from COVID is maybe because they have too many parasites in their bodies. When was the last time you dewormed yourself, sir?
I don't know. Never. I've never dewormed myself. But then again, have you? When was the last time you dewormed yourself?
I deworm myself regularly.
Well, you hang out with animals more than I do.
Yeah.
So you should probably. Chip, would you like to weigh in on how often you deworm? I didn't know the conversation was going that way.
Is that something that one has to do often? Today I was to a dental hygienist and we talked about dental health. Is there now the time to discuss about worming health? Is there
gut health is all the rage? Haven't you heard? You have 2 brains now. One's in your gut, apparently.
We have a lot of people doing various biohacking and stuff, and it's you always go to the doctor when you're sick. So I feel like most doctors are just overwhelmed with just people who are obese and dealing with metabolic disease and all of these things. But you have a lot of people who are really interested in, well, how do you keep people healthy and well? But there's not a lot of research into that area. There's no research being done in how often should we be deworming humans. We do a lot of, we discuss that a lot in dogs and cats because these corporations want to sell you all heartworm medication and want to make sure your dogs and cats get it monthly. But is there any research into how often humans should be deworming? Monthly.
Wait,
hold on. I've had dogs in my life. I didn't deworm those guys monthly.
Me neither.
Well, I can tell you. Here's the thing, because I am not about selling people things that they don't need because I'm a shelter vet, and we're all about how do we cut costs and keep, give our animals in the shelter the care that they need. We don't want to spend extra money on these houseless animals if we don't have to. But we get a lot of dogs in the shelter in California who are heartworm positive. And then we have to treat them before we adopt them out. So I am a big fan of making sure your dog is on monthly heartworm prevention. They get this
Heart-
from
But
mosquitoes.
this is a
Yeah,
prevention
but
thing, right?
heartworm's
It's to
kind of
prevent that
rare
they
in
get worms.
California. I mean,
No, it's not. And especially depending on where you go, if you go like to Lake Tahoe, 1 in 30 dogs, they're heartworm positive. And we all travel with our dogs. If you go to Mendocino
mm,
County, and it's Stockton, we saw a lot of heartworm positive dogs. So the prevention is basically a mosquito comes, lands on your dog, and injects larvae. The prevention kills the larva before it grows into big worms. So that's why you do it monthly. So if your dog
Mm.
does get a mosquito, then, take care of that. But it also deworms them for a bunch of other worms, and dogs sniff the ground and all sorts of things. So, and it's usually combined with flea prevention too. And fleas are just a huge problem. So we keep all of the dogs in the shelter on flea prevention. Dogs get really itchy skin, cats too, from the fleas. Fleas are just the one horrible thing here in Los Angeles
we
too.
have another hold on, we have a clinician here. Are you ready to come on, John? Are you ready to
Oh, I
go?
didn't see John. Yeah.
Yes,
John's here. Hey, John. Hey, how are you?
I'm
I,
well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. We're talking about whether or not I should take ivermectin, apparently.
so I have a question for the human doctor. Do you ever recommend people deworm themselves? Because we dewormed our dogs and cats. Why don't we deworm human beings? CAPC, I love the CAPC website. That's my favorite.
Okay, so
Yeah.
hold on a second. Look at this heartworm. I'm guessing red is bad and blue is good. And look, California, we're doing all right. This is 2019.
All right,
of course.
comparatively, but if you go on to the other things on CAPC, if you go to specific counties in California,
Yeah.
you'll see that some are like 1 in 50, 1 in 30 tests are heartworm positive.
So like I lived in Virginia. We had it was like that area where we would definitely give our dogs heartworm medicine
Yeah.
every
First,
year.
let's have John answer the question of like, should humans deworm themselves, and is that a thing? And why do we deworm dogs and cats and not human beings?
So for humans, I'm not aware of any studies looking into it if it's beneficial,
See,
and
Same.
I wouldn't think that it would be, because it's probably one, very uncommon. My initial guess that trying to treat people presumptively for it, I think it would be very unlikely to make a significant benefit. And prevention is relatively easy. Wash your hands, make sure your food is clean. Fecal oral spread is common for a lot of it. So, routine
Isn't that what it
hygiene.
is? Is it like
In other parts of the world, though, I think there have been mass, I don't know if deworming is the right word, but other places that are more, I guess, developing nations where there's lots of exposure, that especially when things can enter through the skin, for which there are many parasitic diseases that can do that. And deworming is not the right word. I'm blanking on the term now, but kind of mass administration of antiparasitics has been done depending on the disease. And I don't have the details off the top of my head. That's not something I routinely practice, but I am aware that those have been going on in the past, often supported by large philanthropic organizations that sponsor it in resource poor countries. So some programs like that have been done elsewhere. I'm not aware of it being studied, or unsure that it would even be beneficial in this country.
Well, there used to be, right, though, because like there was the long time for a long time. It was like the Southern hick was slower than other people and all this stuff, and they found out that it was hookworm was actually causing it, because people in the South were pooping in outhouses and they would not wear shoes on the way to the outhouse, and they would get hookworm, and that would affect their brains. And once people said, well, they basically said, all you poor people in the South, we just need to get you properly shod, and you won't have these RFK Jr. brain anymore. So I feel like yes, if I were rooting around in my own shit like a dog or a cat, then yeah, I would get it. But like, no, I wash my hands, and I it's a trade-off. And then because of that, we should take B12, right? Because we're not rooting around in our own feces. We have to take B12 now, sanitary reasons. So I don't know. I'm not that worried about but now every time I talk to Crystal, she tells me I shouldn't be afraid of everything and then gives me 10 reasons why I'm supposed to be afraid of everything.
Oh, is that what I do?
That's exactly what you do. Oh, yeah. Don't forget that you called me a princess last time because you think I'm scared too often, and yet, and yet, and yet you give me you tell me I should be deworming my heart. My heart is
I'm not
basically
saying deworming your heart. I'm saying deworming your GI tract, but I don't know.
But wait,
I'm not a medical doctor. I'm just throwing it out there that maybe people should deworm themselves. I don't know.
but
I don't know the answer.
isn't the whole point
But
of preventative medicine for humans, and correct me if I'm wrong, the whole point of preventative medicine is to live a diversified, healthy life and not try to do all sorts of tests and think ahead of whatever diseases you can have, rather just live your
yeah.
life, isn't that?
Health promotion, right?
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, what else do I have to do? I'm vegan. I try not to drink too much, And by the
Not
way,
disease prevention, health
isn't
promotion.
whiskey
Yeah, that's.
dangerous to worms? I'm guessing whiskey kills worms. I'm just
I don't think
throwing
whiskey
that
reaches
out
the
there.
GI tract, though.
Whiskey's got it. I don't know. It depends on how much whiskey you're drinking there, Chip. My pyloric valve runneth o'er. The when you sell booze for a living, you have to learn about the pyloric valve, and that's it. That's
you do? You learn when you sell
yeah.
booze, you have to learn about the pyloric valve?
For like management level, yeah, you have to understand how long people, because you have to know how quickly they're going to get drunk and when it's illegal to serve them drinking, to keep them drinking. So like, for example, you're watching how much they're eating and when they ate. Did they eat before they started drinking? Did they do 3 shots before they started eating? All that matters.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so if people are eating and then afterwards want to do shots, the alcohol's not going to hit them until they get home. So you don't barely have to worry about it because their pyloric valve is shut. Basically, they're not going to absorb the alcohol so much.
Is that
You're the
John?
doctors. How am I?
feel like
I feel like let me
there's a little
mansplain this to the
fuzziness here.
doctors.
I
Huh?
feel
Yeah,
like
that sounds fuzzy to me. I'm not sure
Mhm.
how the
Of course,
pyloric
it's
valve
fuzzy.
works in response to alcohol. Alcohol does relax the lower esophageal sphincter, which increases reflux, which has its own set of symptoms. But the physiology and of the pyloric valve and absorption of alcohol, yeah, I can't comment on that.
I think it has to do with from my basic science, you will absorb alcohol less quickly if you do have a high fat meal, especially. So I think there's something to that, the absorption. You will get drunker quicker on an empty stomach.
Okay, I
Right,
googled
because
But I
of
don't think it has anything to do with the pyloric valve.
So the pyloric valve is a muscle located at the bottom of the stomach that controls the flow of food and liquid into the small intestine. So there's where it comes in, right? So if your pyloric valve is covered with food, the alcohol isn't getting into your small intestine where it absorbs into your bloodstream more quickly.
I would imagine more quickly. I would think you would also absorb alcohol through your stomach wall too, maybe.
Probably, but
Yes.
I don't know that happens. I don't think. Okay, again, I'm not a doctor, but my understanding is that when the alcohol enters your small intestine is when it really hits your bloodstream. Your
Yeah, I
small
can
intestine
imagine that too.
grabs all the alcohol, you get drunk. So if you've
Yeah.
eaten a big meal and your pyloric valve is basically covered by a bunch of food that's being digested, alcohol
Uh-huh.
basically goes on top of that. It takes a while for it to seep down and get you drunk.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense a little bit.
Well,
But,
again, this is this is booze management in Las Vegas. I'm not talking about like clinical trials or shit like that. I don't know about. I just know about how to pace somebody
yeah.
to keep them giving me money for alcohol and
You
pacing
want to
them
be
so
able
they
to give them as much, you want to
That's
sell them
right.
as much alcohol as possible, but you don't want them to be drunk where they're incoherent and pass out, and you have to deal with that.
Or
that
in
what-
California, if you do that, you've broken the law and you can go to jail. In Las Vegas, we don't have
Oh,
dram shop
really?
laws. Yeah. In California, if you get someone drunk and you were responsible for it and they go and crash a car and I don't know, kill somebody or themselves, you're responsible. In Las Vegas,
Can
it's all on the person. You can do, but you still have laws about like it's against the law to give a drunk person more alcohol or to allow a card dealer to deal them cards while drunk.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was quite a tangent
Sorry, I
because
didn't mean to.
we were
It was unintentional.
discussing why talk to
Why I should
conspiracy
get
theorists.
birdworms. I should get
And I
dewormed.
use the example of ivermectin. If doctors, we tend not to talk to conspiracy theorists because we don't want to be looped in with conspiracy theorists. And one person sent me a very angry email saying that I was basically platforming this conspiracy theorist by appearing on his podcast. And I
Which I
don't know.
find crazy. You did not platform him. He platformed you.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
And I was very skeptical throughout the entire podcast.
Yeah, his fans didn't
but
like
since
that
when
about
is
you.
it bad? Since when is it bad to have conversations with people? Shouldn't we?
know, that's what I
Isn't that the whole point? That otherwise, if we close ourselves in echo chambers, we will also close them up in echo chambers, and their community only stems to grow if we never actually interact with them or try to have positive conversations with them, right?
Puppy.
Yeah, or
and
also, how do you get them off of their crazy cycles if you're not going to be engaging with them?
I know. And this is where we have like these little silos of people. You have the people who are like ivermectin cures COVID, and then you have the people who are like ivermectin is horse dewormer. And there's maybe a little room for some discussion in between those two things because neither it might be completely true. Now, I think there is some argument to be made that maybe I didn't do a very good job on his show, which that's what I'm here to discuss is like,
Mhm.
what can I learn from this? And why did I react the way that I did on his podcast? And how might I do it differently if I'm on another conspiracy theorist podcast in the future? What are some other questions I can ask? So
Yeah, and I have it queued up if you want to
yeah, should we
try it
pull
out.
it up and we're just gonna go through the whole thing and maybe pause it here and there, or maybe I don't know if I can just tell you pause it
Just say
here.
stop, or should we
Discuss.
should we get a
discuss.
code word? You can say popcorn, and I'll stop it. But hold on, just so that I'm clear, ivermectin is a horse dewormer, but
And it's a
also a
human
dewormer of
dewormer.
other species. Okay.
Yeah, it's a dewormer of a lot of things. There was somebody I from a long time ago, I did a
Yeah.
video on how I cured a puppy of ivermectin toxicity. And somebody's like, who would be crazy enough to give a dog ivermectin? And it's like, ivermectin is commonly given to dogs. And this was a dosage given by a veterinarian, but this dog had a mutation that made this dog particularly susceptible to ivermectin toxicity. So I was going through how I treated this dog. But now we're so crazy. We're like, who would give ivermectin to a dog? Like,
But the
yes,
dog didn't have any worms, though. The ivermectin.
the dog actually had Demodex, and this was an old method used to cure Demodex. Now we have NexGard, which is like you give one dose and that cures it. But we used to have to give high doses of ivermectin every day, or I shouldn't say high doses, but like a little dose of ivermectin every day to cure it.
Is your beef that the ivermectin is not a horse dewormer per se? It's a multi-species dewormer, and
My
we
beef
should be
is
talking about it like that.
people framing it as horse dewormer are doing it for the purpose of making people who are considering ivermectin seem crazy, and just it's a way to incite some sort of emotion out of people about using ivermectin.
But
You know what I
Crystal, do you
mean?
think
It's
that
manipulative, is what I'm saying. It's a
Okay, so let's
manipulative way to
reframe
talk
it.
about it.
If you said it in the way that it actually is, instead of being manipulative, and you said that ivermectin is a multi-species dewormer, would that be accurate?
Yeah, is a
I would
dewormer.
Okay, if you told me it's a dewormer of any
Or I
species,
would say it's commonly used as a dewormer, because it's not to say that it doesn't also have other functions. Like here's another tangent we could go on is fenbendazole right now. A lot of people are saying fenbendazole can be used to cure cancer. And I don't know if you have any feelings about that, John. It's another
Fenbendazole
dewormer.
for cancer?
Yeah.
I'm not aware of anything.
what is
there some
fenbendazole?
data
I think
that
you should look into that because it's pretty
in humans or animals?
interesting. Both, actually. And I have
Fenbendazole.
used fenbendazole quite frequently in animals for like pretty much any non-specific diarrhea. I'm like, you know what? Let's just throw fenbendazole.
It's also a
at them.
dewormer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hookworms, whipworms,
yeah.
roundworms,
Right.
giardia.
Sounds like it might be a veterinary equivalent of albendazole, which is the one we use in
Yeah, it's a
humans.
similar
Um,
thing.
and I'm not, I
I
mean,
can-
so I don't know the data, but I mean, using an antimicrobial or something in that sphere, even like a vaccine to help prevent cancer, it's not unprecedented, right? In
Yeah.
humans, we have HPV vaccines that reduce cervical and head and neck cancer. You could treatment of H. pylori, I believe, has been shown to reduce the risk of stomach cancer. So there's definitely an infection to cancer link, and whether or not what you're talking about does it, I couldn't comment on, but it's not out of the realm of possibility based on what we know.
I have
Okay.
found that some preclinical research suggests that fenbendazole may inhibit cancer cell growth by disrupting microtubules, starving cancer cells of glucose, triggering apoptosis, I don't know what it is, and boosting the immune responses. But there's no large-scale clinical trials that have confirmed this as of yet.
All right. Now I know why they call it a horse dewormer, right? There's a picture of horse on the box.
But that's one version of
okay,
it. That's
but you
not
could see like
all of it.
Okay,
Apple
but if
flavored.
you told me that this cured COVID, I would probably my immediate action would I'd probably laugh a little first.
I know
Okay,
that's
before.
that's why they say it, because that's the reaction that they're hoping to get out of people.
So
Okay.
I think
are you familiar with the cognitive bias? I don't think it's called rooting, but there's a anchoring. You're familiar with anchoring?
Anchoring bias.
yeah.
Anchoring bias. So whatever, it's a tendency for every human when you hear some fact or concept that's what you anchor to. So
Mhm.
if you say this is a horse dewormer if you're teaching someone who knows nothing about it, and now we want to use it to cure whatever, whether or not you want to, that's what you're drawn to is, oh, it's a horse dewormer. And for me, it's not a horse dewormer, right? It's an antiparasitic drug that has many uses. One of them is deworming horses. One of them is treating intestinal parasites in humans, and it has many uses. If you get anchored to that, that's what you keep coming back to. And I haven't seen what you're talking about specifically, but that's done all over the press to promote
Sure.
an agenda, right?
Mhm.
You can't read RFK Jr. without the next two words being, or before it, vaccine critic.
Yeah.
That's the message that's trying to be sent to pigeonhole him, regardless of what your feelings are. He's the vaccine critic. He's not someone who sued CAFOs over
Mhm.
15 to 20 years. He's the vaccine critic. And that's whether or not, again, what your feelings are, that's what many people have anchored now. And it's difficult, unless you make an effort and aware of the bias, to switch from horse dewormer or vaccine critic to consider everything else involved.
Yeah. I love
Sure.
one reporter referring to me as an anti-factory farming activist. And I'm like, well, then you have to refer to the other side as pro-factory farming activists, please.
right.
Very
Right.
not fair.
Or
Anyway.
radical vegan extremists.
Mhm.
Billionaire Elon Musk.
Yeah. So you've got
Yeah.
dozens of examples off the top of your head. I just
Yeah.
wanted to point that out. That's a technique that's done by the media, as well as probably others in persuasion or even negotiation technique.
True.
Anchoring bias, it's real.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All I'm saying is that I don't really hold it against people. When I heard about this ivermectin thing, and Joe Rogan especially, and that Aaron Rodgers talking about how they're curing everyone's COVID with this secret. Every time I hear about there's this secret thing, it reminds me of that charlatan who released that book, the medical secrets they don't want you to know about.
Yeah.
And it turned out it was all bullshit. It was all this crazy stuff, but it sold a lot of books. People bought it in droves. But it always feels like if there's a secret, there's a secret. We all know what the secret is. It's diet and exercise. That's
But it's so
we
Well,
funny.
all
I
It's so
mean,
know.
funny
to
that
be
people.
someone from the medical profession, I know the veterinary field is hiding a lot of shit, you know,
Yeah,
for a
they're hiding.
fact. Ventilation shutdown, the AVMA are silencing voices like mine who are talking about the harms of animal agriculture. So if I were to
But
write a book, the things that the veterinary profession doesn't want you to know about, like that could be the titles for my book. It'd be a very it'd be a certain title and it might get me dismissed but in a lot of
but
circles, and that's not my goal. My goal is to bridge the divide instead of creating all this. But legitimately, there are things, big pharma, they do want you they want to sell their products.
Well,
They
they
want
buy
to expand
patents,
their
they
so
crush
market.
them, they go.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
Because
Yeah,
they want to sell you products, they would rather sell you something that is easy to make, that is cheap to make. So if ivermectin is something easy to make and against COVID, don't you think they would have wanted you to know that it is easy to make, especially in a time when COVID is a big deal? Like, this conspiracy theories makes no sense. And a lot of the times, all of these conspiracy theories against big pharma don't make sense for this purpose, because they forget this fact that big pharma want to make money. So therefore, if there is something that would cure cancer, they would want to sell it because a lot of people would want to buy it.
yeah,
Well, no, but ivermectin is generic, and
that's
there's a lot of big contracts out to like get money from the government to help. They want to get grant money to study a new cure for COVID. So, and there's a lot of grant money out there to get the vaccine because of, it's whatever the hot thing is.
yeah. But what you said
Vaccines are
originally,
more able to get grant money than cures or than treatments for COVID. So I can see that
and I would
how
go
this comes
down that.
about.
I would go down that primrose path with you totally. But what you started out was the premise that we go see doctors and we take dogs to vets. We go see a doctor when something's already wrong, right? When we're already
Yeah.
sick. Instead of doing all of the basic work to actually stay healthy.
But that because that's like human nature is we only deal with something when it gets so bad that we have to deal with it. Very few of us are able to plan for the future. This is why so many of us are in debt. This is why the credit card companies, banks take advantage of consumers because consumers want to get more debt. They don't want to save for the future, and being healthy is like saving for the future. So, and very more percentage of people lack the self-discipline to save for the future, to be healthy, to like go the extra mile, to like stay in shape and eat right and all of the things. Much easier to sell people debt, to sell people junk food, to, we have a lot more doctors who are out there trying to just manage disease rather than a few doctors who are, marketing to the few people who are investing in their health. That's a smaller market than
Yeah, they're not as
managing
easy
disease.
marks. Like I don't like I'm a hard mark for a doctor in this whole pharma thing, and much to my detriment probably. And when I get to a certain age, it's going to bite me in the ass. But because I'm relatively healthy, I don't engage in too many bad habits, and I'm vegan and I exercise. I don't ever go to a doctor. I don't ever think about going to doctors. I don't take
Because
any
I'm
medication.
vegan, I
Probably
go to
should.
the doctor often and I get
Yeah.
blood work and I like lord my superior blood work, my biomarkers
I've
over
never been
others.
interested in
Show
my
me your
biomarkers.
biomarkers. Show me your biomarkers.
Show me your
What's your blood
biomarker.
pressure? Yeah.
I'm sure.
You
Well,
need
I
to
don't. I
argue
could go
with
to
me about health.
CVS and stick my arm in that robot to find out what my BP is, but I'm not
Yeah.
gonna go
I
and.
have it at home. I have a
Oh,
blood
wow.
measuring at home, and I have all of it at home, so I do it myself.
Yeah, but you
Nice.
weigh your food and
I'm
count
next
your
level,
calories.
Crystal.
Yeah.
Nice.
I also count calories and I
Well, John,
record everything I eat. Yes.
what about the MD? Do you get your blood work done regularly? Are you like always looking at your biomarkers?
No, almost never.
There's
That's-
different types of
I'm
people.
with
It's,
John.
you know.
Yes.
I-
So-
we're hypochondriacs.
so little of it is actually beneficial. Even basic stuff like current best practices, you don't need a CBC every year, basic profile. There's almost, the supposedly, getting your cholesterol checked once a year is about the only thing that's kind of a recommended practice. And even that is, again, that could be its whole podcast as to whether or not that's even beneficial, although it's the current, as an MD, I have to say you should follow recommendations and get it done. But there's risks and benefits, and it's a very, very narrow window for certainly primary prophylaxis for cholesterol. But aside from that, stuff like PSA, CBC, even basic labs, vitamin D levels, stuff which is, again, people can kind of make their own decisions. But in terms of public recommendations and what you should do, it's kind of unfortunate, because as we were getting at, health promotion should be more emphasized, and more data should be available, in my opinion, in terms of what should be subsidized and what should be checked more often, because there's probably a lot more that could be done for prevention that would not only promote health as opposed to treat disease, but in the long run cost the healthcare system much less.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like if you had an AI that took all those numbers of data and all that stuff, and you're like, oh, you have a something percent chance of developing Parkinson's, so I guess you better start taking ivermectin. I'd be like, okay, I guess.
I like how you slipped that one in there, Skyjack.
Sure. If you plugged all of my data into a machine and it said, yo, you're gonna get Parkinson's unless, I would do that. I would do whatever followed in that sentence, right? But that's not what they do. They give you a bunch of numbers, and then you're like looking for this optimal place where you're supposed to be, and then you still end up getting ALS or something horrible that's like just debilitating, worst way to go stuff, and it's all just seems like luck at the end of the day. You dot all your I's and you cross all your T's, you watch your P's and Q's, and you still end up getting hit by a car. So you might as well.
Is that better than how we have it here in the Netherlands? Because in the Netherlands, if you go and do blood work from the doctor, you do not see any of the results. The doctor only calls you if there is something. So you might wait for a phone call, or you will only get one if there is something that to be called for. And even if there is something wrong, like I have some issue with my eyes that sometimes I see blind spots for 30 minutes, whatever. It's a weird thing. And I get it like every couple of months. And the doctor said, come to me when you go blind. So
yeah. We'll get.
Wow.
I don't know.
Well-
I've only had the full physical once, and I was in the best shape of my life. Everything, all my numbers came out great, and then they did like my BMI and stuff, and they said, "Well, we would consider you pre-obese," and I'm like, I am buffer, and because I was heavy, but it was all muscle back then. I was young. I was lifting kegs and stuff. I was working for Anheuser-Busch. I was really fit, and like pre-obese, so watch out for that. We all just laughed about it, and because all these other dudes in Virginia who are working at the AB factory that you could guess, like they were all smokers, and they're all big.
Well, I mean, okay, so before I was vegan, I was very anemic, and I had a hemoglobin of 5 and needed a blood transfusion. And so that's when I really started checking my blood work regularly. And when I went to get a blood transfusion, the person next to me was getting an iron transfusion, and I'm like, so I just want to ask, are you like vegan, vegetarian? They're like, no, I'm a meat eater. I was low on iron, so they're giving me an iron transfusion. So it's like it's just something you have to keep track of. And I also take vitamin D3 every day, but
Same.
I went and get my blood checked, and I was low on vitamin D. So they give me like a
Okay,
super
then
dose of
I have
it.
to ask John now. I have to ask John if he's taken supplements.
I take vitamin D every day.
Same.
So yeah, I take that. I take some algae oil as well, and MCT oil. So again, these are my personal decisions. These are
How
not.
long have you been doing it?
Algae oil is only a few months. I was doing fish oil for a while before I got down this pathway and realized fish have omega-3s because they eat algae. And
Yeah.
Mhm.
so now I'm doing algae oil. And MCT oil, I started a while ago and then I stopped and I kind of started again over the past few months. And vitamin D3, I moved to Oregon and I have struggled with mood in the past, and it probably was not the best for me here. So, I mean, vitamin D3, it's not a recommendation by anybody for everyone to take, but I think the benefit, my personal opinion, is for me, the benefits outweigh the risks. It affects sleep, immunity, mood. It's got so many benefits, and I think the downsides of over supplementation are minimal. So again, as an MD, I'm not recommending that to anyone. Talk to your doctor before
Mhm.
starting. But I was asked what I take personally, and just general multivitamin. It's kind of what I take.
So I don't know, Crystal. You've been taking all these meds, all
Yeah.
these vitamins, all this time. I started
I think it's
taking a.
helping.
Sky, you should take. I've been
Hold on,
doing
I didn't
the.
share mine. I take a
You should.
multivitamin and I drink my Huel and but that didn't start until I turned 40. Like I never took I've been vegan 20 years. I never took B12. I never took D. I never took nothing. I tried to have half a brain and try to eat the rainbow and stuff. I didn't really think about I went vegan for ethical reasons. I didn't really. Come on, B12 there's B complex inside of beer, there's B complex inside of all of the fermented stuff that we eat. It's not that hard to pick up. And nutritional yeast, I just never really thought about it. But then I read this thing, and I could be wrong. Maybe John could actually corroborate or just contradict. But I read this thing a long time ago that said when a man turns 40, or maybe it's women too, but I was reading in a Men's Health thing, that it's harder for you to like hold on to your vitamins, that you lose them more quickly. So you need to start being more serious about it. So when I got into my 40s, I started taking it. I took a multi. I started thinking about vitamins a little bit more. But I think that didn't happen till middle age.
Interesting. Well, I don't know. I'm all
Well,
about,
Sky, let me just tell you, because right now, I got the result for my certified nutritionist exam exactly just now, coincidentally. And I will tell you that you do need to supplement B12 and vitamin D, probably not you because you live in California and you might get enough sun. But for people living like me in the Netherlands, or people who are mostly living in places where you don't get enough sun, especially during the winter, you should 100% supplement vitamin D.
if you're inside most of the day, like most of us, and plus I don't like to go out. I don't want like sun damage on my skin. So whenever I'm outside, I like cover up totally.
Yeah, you're
So,
like you picked the worst place to live.
I know.
The West Coast. You should be living in Oregon, and John should be
But
living
no,
down
I
here.
don't like the cold. I died up in Washington. It was so
What
freezing.
about but fortified foods? That's why we put iodine in the salt. It's why we put vitamin D in dairy. That's why we put B12 in the nooch, right? Well, that happens naturally, but there's B12 now in soy milk. That's why we do that. So you don't have to worry about all this extra shit. That's why they put B12 in the cow flesh. That's why there's
I don't know.
B12 in hamburgers.
But that's
To
still
me,
a
it
form of
seems
supplementation.
It
There's
is, but
fortified foods.
there's a
okay, but
lot
you're
of
like, but what you
vegans.
said was we all got to start taking pills. Man, pill
No,
culture, I'm
I'm just
done with
saying
it.
this is what I do, and
It's
I
just
recommend it.
easier.
And
Yeah, I also recommend it because it's just easier. As John said, the benefits outweigh the downsides, right?
If you're not careful about this shit, you'll be like RFK, like putting the blue drops in his water on the airplane. Like, what
hey,
was he
dude,
doing, or what was he? He's taking nicotine pills during the Senate hearing, and he's taking
it works.
HGH. Like,
Jack, can I interrupt it? You just said something you said I think is kind of important about, which I learned not too long ago. One of a plug for animals again is the concept that you have to eat animals to get certain nutrients is largely misleading a lot of the times, in part because animals are supplemented, and Crystal can speak to this better than I am, with various supplements that create like that, right? You're saying you have to eat cows to get iron is like saying you have to eat cow manure to get B12. which
Yeah.
apparently manure is loaded with B12. So yeah,
Yeah.
you could drink a cup a day of cow shit to get your B12 level, but no one's recommending that. So yeah, it's how it's framed.
Except for certain Hindu sects, they do that.
Hey, if that's your
Yeah.
thing, fine.
I
Yeah.
tried to respond to this comment in the chat, but it wasn't working. Kathy always says plant-based and vegan. You know my stance on this. I say animal-free because I want to center the animals. So I don't say plant-based. I don't say vegan. I say animal-free. Anyway,
I'm
and
a
animal rights.
Yeah, and that was I learned that only relatively recently, Crystal, is the idea of fish oil. It's really from algae, and so that's a really easy way for someone to switch if they're interested in fish oil, which I believe is a cardiology group recommendation to be on fish oil.
Yeah.
It may have changed recently, but people still need omega-3s. We don't make them on our own for the most part, and so that's an easy way for someone to make a simple switch to help save some of the fish that we farm by the trillions of pounds a year. Is switching to algae oil from fish oil.
Yeah.
Or
All right.
chia seeds. Chia seeds are also a great source
Yeah, I
of.
take chia seeds or eat chia seeds every day.
I eat
Love it.
fortified foods. So
Anyway,
all right. So you want to do the John
let's
Cullen?
do this.
See what
Let's
he's got
play
going
this
on.
and tell me, because I want to learn how
So
to do better in this situation.
I skipped the intro because it's a little bit, but
No,
it's a-
well, the intro where he introduces me is great because it's like this is
Hey,
the
Crystal, can you give me
backlash.
some quick background?
I was
So
about
John
to go for
Cullen
it.
is this conspiracy theorist. He has a lot of followers, and he asked me to be on his show. I think the first part of it kind of explains it. He became interested in the bailout money, but his dealio is the belief that COVID is really H5N1. The COVID vaccine isn't really a COVID vaccine, it's an influenza vaccine. It's not really the COVID outbreak, it's an H7N9 outbreak. They're covering up gain of function research that led to this outbreak of this disease. And I don't know, go for it. If that's enough background for you.
And then they wanted to talk to Crystal.
Yeah.
And he's got but we're not
Hi, this is John Cullen. Welcome to another episode of Hypothetically Speaking. I'm joined today by Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, Crystal Heath. Am I pronouncing that right, Crystal? Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, good. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'm thrilled to have you here. You and I connected on Twitter, and I guess we're X now. I don't want to be politically incorrect. Can you tell everybody a little bit about how you learned of my work and how we ended up connecting, and then how we put this together?
So it's all about
we
how
should-
do
we
you
should-
know me? Anyway.
We should also, if anybody wants to stop, just say it. Okay,
Okay.
this is how we got to play this game because I can't read.
Now
your
that you
mind.
stopped,
Yes.
is X really the politically correct way of calling Twitter? Wouldn't
No,
Twitter be the
that's-
politically correct
it's
way
just-
of calling Twitter?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just had to be pedantic about it because it's
Well,
ridiculous. Yes.
Is it politically correct?
He says
But-
a lot of things where it's like you'd like to like that. So yeah. Anyway. And feel free to talk
him the back.
over too if that's if you just got some snide comment to say.
You want to be you want to
Play on.
Story, and then we'll get into some of the heart of the matter.
Well, I think some of my Twitter followers on X might have been commenting on a lot of my posts like, hey, you need to follow John Cullen. You need to follow his work. And I think they might have did vice versa and showed you a lot of my data on bailout money and all of this stuff. So that's sort of how we connected, thanks to X, I guess.
So tell people.
to be politically correct, obviously.
Yeah.
So for the folks who aren't familiar with your background, so so I only know one joke
And this
for
is-
veterinarians,
Oh
right?
gosh.
and that is what do you call a physician that only can work on one species? Right, a doctor,
A
right?
doctor. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And you guys have to deal with turtles and
That's the whole joke. His joke
Yeah, it's
sucked.
not a joke.
I've heard
Not
that one
about-
before. I actually think it's kind of funny.
My joke is better. I had a bunch of doctor jokes. What do you call a vet with a sore throat?
A horse doctor.
A horse doctor.
Oh,
Come on, that one always gets a laugh. Give me
That
a
is better, yeah.
better than that.
snakes.
Or maybe he just doesn't know how to tell jokes.
no, for anyone who follows, oh, sorry, I'm off the video. For anyone who follows Seinfeld, there's a great scene where Kramer is going, I'll take
Yes.
a vet over an MD any day. They have to cure a chicken, a lizard, a horse, a dog, all in the same day.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite episodes, actually. Kramer.
Birds and fish and all kinds of stuff. So
Yeah.
it's a lot harder than people realize. Can you tell people a little bit about your veterinary background, and then about the research that you've been doing that that people have been following you on X? Tell people a little bit about what you found there.
Well, I graduated from veterinary school in 2012. I work as a shelter veterinarian for nonprofits. I've always been involved in animal agriculture, grew up on a farm, was in 4-H. So I've been interested in farm to animal welfare for a long time, grew up riding horses and everything. Then I graduated vet school in 2012 and sort of got involved more in animal advocacy work, then became notorious as this animal rights terrorist, according to the industry, for speaking out about some of the industry practices. Glenn Greenwald had me on his show to kind of go over the industry surveillance and the way that they retaliated against me for voicing concerns about some of their practices.
Welcome to a new edition of System Update. I'm Glenn Greenwald. This episode focuses on numerous tactics used by the animal agricultural industry and factory farms to target, retaliate against, and persecute any activists who work to expose or otherwise denounce the barbaric practices regularly used by this industry.
The barbaric practices regularly used by this industry on factory farms. Crystal loves the term factory farm.
Yeah, I don't use the term factory farm. It's modern intensive animal protein, whatever I say. Modern intensive animal-based protein production practices. But yeah, look, we're bringing this whole thing to a brand new audience. Discussing how awful this industry is and how they retaliate against me. I think that's great stuff. You can keep playing. This is going to be a long show if we keep pausing like this. Let's moving along.
Well, I could play.
And we focus on a particularly pernicious campaign recently discovered as the result of a FOIA request obtained by The Intercept to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which targeted a very respected Berkeley area veterinarian, Dr. Crystal Heath, who has long worked with shelters and spaying and neutering animals, as well as an animal rights activist, to target her and destroy her reputation in a coordinated campaign from industry groups,
Just
from
me being a
lobbyist
pick-me
groups and
vegan.
other industry activist groups, in retaliation for her denouncing various savage practices used by the industry that, as a veterinarian, she was particularly well qualified to speak about.
Then I founded the nonprofit Our Honor, and we aim to support and empower veterinarians and veterinary students in speaking their conscience and working for the best interests of all species. Since then, we've also been looking into the bailouts that have been given to corporations during this avian influenza outbreak. And this current one started in 2020. And we've discovered that these corporations have received quite a bit of our money for exterminating their poultry flocks in often very cruel ways by sealing up buildings, pumping in heat, waiting for the birds inside to die. We started voicing concerns about this depopulation practice, which is allowed by the American Veterinary Medical Association, and then faced a lot of backlash for that. The veterinary profession said we are out to cause them harm, that we are against animal agriculture, just for asking these giant corporations who make billions of dollars to put plans in place to use less cruel methods to exterminate their birds. So there's definitely a lot of problems with the industry, and they love to push back and retaliate against people who are sort of raising concerns about these practices. And I've noticed throughout all of my work that this is a common theme in a lot of.
Crystal, do you think that the reason why you're being singled out like this is because you're just recognizing that there are less cruel ways to execute millions of birds at a time?
Are you or are you saying that they're really retaliating against me because I'm anti-animal agriculture, because I want to end animal agriculture?
Yeah. Or that you're suggesting that even though you go to great lengths to not call people out for, like, you try not to tell people, hey, it's on you, you need to make different choices, but that's still what they hear, isn't it?
Yeah.
They still hear, oh, you think you're better than me, you think that I should stop eating animals. That's what they hear.
Oh yeah, because I mean, the animal rights movement has been very judgmental and hostile, and I think that's why we are so ineffective, because we don't understand do-gooder derogation, and we haven't done anything to combat that human nature to derogate anybody who we view as telling us that what we're doing is wrong. We haven't paid attention to how the Trump administration, how Trump people, Elon Musk, how they get people on their side by telling them, you're doing fine, you're great, you're one of us. It's that minority of people, those are the ones who are out to cause you harm. We need to take a page out of their book and take a page out of the animal agriculture industry's book for how they get people on their side by telling them, no, you're cool, you're one of us. It's they're out to get you. So, I think I am facing a backlash that is the result of the failures of the animal rights movement in their messaging previously.
But the message is still that, all right, but like, the laughable thing is that, okay, but we don't even need to kill all these birds, right? This doesn't have to be, we don't have to be doing this at all.
We don't, yeah, no. And all I'm asking for, and this is the way that they've dismissed me, is by saying this militant vegan with a streak of zealotry, as in the words of Dr. Simon Shane, has no viable alternatives for what we must do. And so I've been saying nonstop, yes, I have a viable alternative for this very predicament that you've put yourself in right now of having millions of avian influenza infected birds. I say there is a less cruel method, but I also say we need to end our dependence on modern intensive animal-based protein production. I mean, all animal-based protein production. We need to take eggs off of menus. We need to replace egg ingredients, dairy ingredients with animal-free ingredients. I mean, yes, that's what my goal is. And I'm not telling people go vegan. I think obviously people should conscientiously object to this, but I understand that the messaging of go vegan is a failure. And because billions of dollars of marketing goes into telling people that they need these foods, and they've made it very difficult. They've denied people choices. They've denied people the ability to eat food in alignment with their values. So that's why I think the go vegan message is a failure. We should celebrate people who are conscientiously objecting, but because you're eating these products does not mean that you're not paying for it. You are forced to pay for it, whether you buy these products or not. And that's what we need to tell people. You don't get a chance to choose what you eat, choose what companies you support.
But since we're making this video to kind of like criticize the performance here, right? Now we're like 10 minutes into this thing. We're 6 minutes into this video. And like, I don't know. I feel like, how I criticize Ed Winters a lot because he got on to a huge show in England, and they asked him, okay, fine, you have the mic. You have 10 seconds to tell me why I should be vegan. And he comes up with antibiotic resistance. And it's like, that's the worst thing to say. If someone hands you a mic.
It wasn't just that.
But here I have an hour and 44 minutes. I know this is going to be a long interview. I'm here to like groom the audience into
Okay.
like animal agriculture. I'm here to like, or pepper in, you shouldn't trust the animal-based protein industry. Maybe
Yeah.
question your choices. In a way, you have, when a lot of vegans, animal rights activists get on camera, they're like, they have 10 seconds to make a message. So they make some message of like, animal agriculture is the Holocaust or whatever, which turns off a bunch of people. It doesn't make your point. Whereas I think, the last news video that I went on when I said, ultimately we need to move away from our dependency on this method of protein production. I think that was a good one at the end. That
Well, it
final
turns
thing I
people off
said.
too, to be frank. I mean, no matter what you do, you're going to turn some off and convince others. Some people hear the Holocaust thing and they think, God damn, it is kind of like a Holocaust. Shit.
I've
And other
never known
people,
anybody who have
There's people
responded well to that.
there's people
Personally.
like Rafaela, the militant vegan, who is actually also an animal rights victim. Sorry, an animal rights activist. She said she became vegan because somebody called it a Holocaust, and she never realized that it is
Interesting.
kind of like a Holocaust.
we never know what's going to trigger someone into making
Yeah.
changes when it
No,
comes to this,
I
which is
guess we don't.
why I think Crystal's bigger point, which is we don't even need to engage with that necessarily, because what we're trying to do is something one level up, basically, which is not really addressing people's personal choices per se, even though we should, like you said, celebrate the ones who are conscientiously objecting and all that. But I guess, like, to erode people's faith in these large corporations and the whole system, I don't know, maybe there's a pithier way to say that right off the bat in the beginning of an interview. And that's why I think it's the only reason I'm bringing it up is that in the beginning of an interview, rather than like, because I don't know, we seem to
I'm
focus
making the
on
point
like,
too that anybody who's just asking for minor welfare reforms in the industry gets backlash. What does that say about the industry? When I'm not even, I'm being framed as this radical extremist when my views are very much in line with the vast majority of people believe and expect here. So that's, I think, wanting to make the audience not immediately turn away from you thinking that like, oh yeah, she doesn't believe like I believe. Most people right now think that there's a good way to raise animals for food. And I'm saying
yeah,
we
but you're
can't even advocate for a good way, because even if you do, you face all of this backlash. And what's going on with animals right now is horrifying. And any of us trying to make it a little bit better for them faces all this backlash. So
but
anyway,
you're still a claims maker. You're making claims. So off the bat, if we're gonna start an interview with someone like John Cullen, I guess I would just say, why not start off making a claim, and then you'll get into, well, what does that mean? How is this happening? And and then you could talk about your personal experiences with being chastised, ostracized, whatever.
okay.
But let's hear her out, Sky.
Interesting.
We're 5 minutes in. We're 6 minutes in.
Well,
and
I know, but we're
there's
supposed to
long
be
time.
all right.
Let's
That-
keep
go-
going instead of
go
arguing back and
focus.
forth. In medicine, it's like, we know better, and how dare you question what we're doing? And we
It's not
can't
just
let
medicine.
the public know.
Yeah, well, it's not just
what we're
medicine
doing.
anymore. It's pretty much everything.
Yeah.
It seems there's a class
Mhm.
of we know better, right? And just pshaw, just
Mhm.
we don't have time for this. And what's happened is you stumbled into something that's one of the biggest national security cover-ups in the history of the country.
Yeah. I mean, I think
And
we might disagree on some of the things, but I'm happy to like dive into it and
Mhm.
discuss and learn more about what you've uncovered, and
Mhm.
maybe compare it with what I've uncovered, because
all right, so when you started learning about what's going on with this bird flu outbreak and what are they doing with the poultry, your research took you back to what? So kind of walk the audience through this, because you kind of, next thing you know, you're in the midst of this thing, and you're in the midst of it because you come from the world of veterinary medicine. You're aware of it. So it's almost like it's a subculture of people who are aware of what's happening here in this particular time frame. You, people who are in the poultry farming industry, whether it's birds, eggs, whatever it is that they're selling, are going to be aware of it. People who are selling feed into that world. But you had a very unique perspective, and your research, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And it gets bigger and more complex. Can you walk the audience through, like, what were you learning? What, your awareness, where you went from what is going on to, whoa, what is going on?
Yeah.
What is, can you walk them through that? Spend a couple minutes on that?
Yeah. So I guess it all kind of started in 2020 with COVID. And that's when we first became aware that they were sealing up barns, pumping in heat to kill pigs during the COVID outbreak because a lot of the slaughterhouse workers were sick and couldn't come to work. So that decreased the number of shackles on the slaughter line, their capacity.
Whoa. Okay. So whoa. Let's separate A, what was happening, and B, their explanation for what.
Yeah, their explanation.
Right. Okay. So A, so the audience is possibly not aware of this, that in 2020, they were pumping what into slaughterhouses because not enough. All right. We won't get into the explanation. Yeah. What were they? They were pumping and killing the pigs. Why would they kill the pigs? So they were pumping something and killing pigs. Pumping
heat and steam into barns to kill pigs because they didn't have the capacity to slaughter them. And they had already overstocked the pig barns, and they were like, there's nothing else we can do. We have to kill them because there's too many pigs. This is a welfare disaster due to COVID.
This doesn't get a lot of press. I don't recall Anderson Cooper. I don't think Christiane Amanpour went out to the pig farm. I don't remember seeing a whole lot on the story. Where did you find this? How did you learn that they're exterminating pigs because nobody's coming to work at the slaughterhouses? So let's kill the pigs with gas and heat. Where did you learn about this?
So I learned about this from an animal rights group who had reached out to me and said, like, were you aware that they're doing this? They had been told by a whistleblower who worked for one of the pig barns that this was happening. So they actually ended up recording this taking place, and they have footage of the pigs being heated to death and screaming. They have audio of the pigs screaming for hours and hours.
And you've seen that.
And this is in The Intercept if you want to look it up too. Okay. And I reached out to my veterinary colleagues and I was like, were you aware that they're doing this? And they're like, that's animal rights propaganda. And it wasn't until it did finally reach the press, and then the industry had to respond, the pig company had to respond and said, don't worry, we're using American Veterinary Medical Association approved methods to mass exterminate these animals. And a lot of us were like, what? We do not approve of this method of mass killing animals. This is incredibly cruel.
And the rationale is that because our workers aren't coming in because of COVID, we got too many pigs, and, well, we sure as hell aren't going to feed them, so we're going to kill them.
Yeah, and they had already, so the problems with pigs is once they reach a certain weight, they go over that, they're too big to slaughter during the normal systems because, and it's kind of a just-in-time model, pigs grow very fast.
Okay.
And they quickly run out of space if they don't immediately go to slaughter.
So there's a certain
when they're the right weight
of truth to this.
Yeah.
Okay. It
so
just seems like a rather drastic solution to a semi-temporary appearing problem. I don't know. Am I reacting here? Or
their arguments are the numbers were so big. And even the whistleblower said they had already had too many pigs in that space, and they had already overstocked their pigs.
Tyson Foods warned it expects to temporarily close more meat plants this year amid the coronavirus pandemic. Tyson said it has and expects to continue to face slowdowns and temporary pausing of production because of worker shortages or choices made to ensure safety. The company released the news in a press release announcing second quarter sales. Just last week, President Trump signed an executive order to keep
So you
meat
can pause it real
processing
quick
plants
because I
open.
just
So
want to
they
answer this
needed to do
question
this.
and this of why not send it to a poor country. So they couldn't. There's so many pigs, they couldn't send them. There was no way to kill them, no way to slaughter them in the normal system. So you couldn't send them to another country. You couldn't put them on a boat and ship them like millions of pigs. It's the numbers are
They're
huge and
alive, yeah.
ginormous. Like so, there was no. They tried to give away the pigs to neighbors, but there's so many. They couldn't deal with this number of pigs and in this horrifying system.
There was something
Sorry.
about also most slaughterhouses aren't equipped to deal with just the size of these pigs. The pigs that were slaughter age were actually far too big by the point. There's nothing they couldn't even fit them
Yeah.
through the chutes and all the things that they needed to that they normally use.
Yeah, there's just not enough people to even process
To
those bigger
process them,
pigs too.
right.
Like you couldn't like shoot them and slaughter them on site too. It's just not enough people to do that. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't forget, people forget that slaughterhouse workers weren't working, which was the whole problem. So even if you came up with creative ways to slaughter these animals, there wouldn't be the people to do it.
yeah. And
It's-
Temple Grandin was talking about like chop up like half the carcasses and send like boxed meat, like not fully process them. Like Temple Grandin had all of these other solutions, but it still like was a drop in the bucket compared to what we were dealing with here. So anyway, you can continue playing.
We don't know how many pigs they exterminated this way, but it could have been millions.
And where
There's
was
actually-
this? What state? California?
Iowa.
Tonight, signs that a critical link in the nation's food supply chain might be cracking as some meat processing plants around the country have become COVID-19 hotspots. So far, over 1,000 employees of meat processing giants like Tyson, JBS, and Smithfield have tested positive for the virus, forcing the temporary closure of at least 15 plants. Some employees, like this worker at an Iowa Tyson plant, are scared to show their face because they don't want to lose their jobs, but are even more terrified of getting sick.
They didn't have enough material or masks and things like that to provide to us, so they would start giving us different types of rags and stuff.
Storm Lake's a very active town. Because of the lake, I guess it is a lot of people that like to come to Storm Lake. I am from a small town from my country, back in Honduras.
Agriculture has always been the mainstay, and certainly Tyson's a big part of that with both of their plants. But we also have manufacturing of grain bins, augers. There's also an egg producing plant, which is north of our community, which also employs a large amount of people. The medical field also employs a lot of people here in town. The regional medical center. The other spot that we also pick up a lot of people is education.
And I believe Kansas and Nebraska were states that commonly did it. There's actually a study published in the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association about the killing of nearly 250,000 pigs.
Can you share that
using
with me?
this method.
Would you?
Yeah, absolutely. I can share it with
All
you.
right, so here's the thing.
And I
So
shared
you
it with
just
him
gave
and
me
he didn't show it.
goosebumps.
But
Mhm.
He did it, yeah.
You know that I have a background in mapping cartography. You know about that?
let's talk about
Not
me.
specifically.
Okay.
Not really.
All right. So you know the
The
map
hell?
from COVID
You don't know
that
that
you would
about
see
me?
on TV all the time with the red dots and the
Yeah.
showing it was a disaster everywhere. My team at Oracle built that software in like 35 years ago. So I went out to
Okay.
meet with the
Big deal.
company and they said, we want to map data. And
That's so
all
easy
of
to
us at
do
Oracle
too.
were like, what do you mean you want to map
Is
data?
it?
We couldn't understand what the hell
Yeah.
they were talking about. And we built this thing. So when I saw Johns Hopkins using the map to map the thing, I said, that's my system. I mean, we built that thing. I mean, click, 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 let's go. Right?
Oh, wow.
I know how to do this thing.
Oh, wow.
Guess where the avian influenza outbreak appears in the United States?
Well, I'm guessing. Well, I've seen some of your videos where it's like New York, but also we know a lot of it was in the Midwest.
Yes,
Near the
I'm talking about in
slaughterhouse.
birds. All right, so I'm
Yeah.
talking about in birds, not
Oh, in birds.
I'm talking about in birds, not people. So there is a map that CITRAP publishes. All right, do you know Michael Osterhoff?
Oh yeah, yeah.
All right. So Osterhoff at CITRAP has a map of avian influenza in birds all over the world. They track samples and they aggregate it. The outbreak of bird flu in the United States in birds appears.
You can stop that right there.
Iowa.
Oh my God. The
I'll send
outbreak
you the
of
map.
avian influenza in birds is in the Midwest where we raise
Makes
all
sense.
sorts. Like he's making it like shocking discovery, shocking connection when it's like, yes, that's where we farm animals.
But is he going to connect it to the whole cartography map thing that he's saying?
Yeah, he's like drawing this
Oh no,
connection.
he invented the map, so he knew this what gained him that insider access. This is how he knew what he was looking at.
That's what he's saying. Okay, I thought he was going to make a connection between the map of. Okay.
No, it's what gave him his superpower of noticing. It's kind of like when the engineer tells you that building 7 of the World Trade Center was an inside job, like because I'm an engineer, I know, I saw it,
Makes
Hey, Crystal, I need to jump
I'll show
off.
it to you.
Oh, okay.
How much longer are you going to go?
I mean, this is going to be a long
Okay.
one. Feel free to jump back on it.
I've got the link. I can check in later.
Okay.
But you may be done. But thank you for asking me. I was able to get on for a minute here, last minute. But I do want to chat with you after, if that's
okay.
If you can get in touch with me, please.
Yeah, I will. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much.
John, bye. All right, here we go.
But I'm looking at birds, not pigs. You're telling me they're killing the pigs. I'm telling you where they're killing the pigs is where I see avian influenza in birds.
In 2020?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So
and
we now just overlaid your findings.
Here, so this is
with
why I didn't
my findings.
Because he's talking nonsense. You're like, in 2020.
I'm like,
so during COVID, he's saying that during COVID he found avian influenza using a COVID map.
I think he was looking at Michael Osterholm's avian influenza outbreak map and saying that COVID and avian because COVID, like there were outbreaks of COVID in the slaughterhouses in the Midwest. That was where COVID started, and really exploded. But that's also, he's saying that's where avian influenza was too. I mean, because it makes sense because there's always avian influenza, like low pathogenic, high pathogenic in the Midwest, because that's where we also raise birds. So this is like correlation does not equal causation situation here anyway.
But also, does everyone know what John's what his position is on this?
What do you mean?
I'm guessing he's a COVID denier.
No, he doesn't deny it, I don't think.
He says COVID exists, but the people with COVID are also maybe infected with H5N1. And the COVID was a cover-up of H5N1, the gain of function research done there, and they created COVID as a way to cover up H5N1. That's his stance, I think.
Is there any way to debunk that? Well, of course you can debunk it, like if you work in a laboratory, and I'm guessing you have seen the RNA of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, but is there any way a regular person could debunk something like that?
It's really hard because he makes the point that the problem is we took H7 out of the PCR tests, and here in the United States we were just testing for COVID. So yeah, like people were maybe positive for COVID, but there are also a lot of sicknesses. I don't know if he thinks that maybe the COVID tests are really an H7N9 test. I don't think he thinks that. I think he thinks we're not looking for H7N9.
Yeah, but he thinks that he thinks that it's all that COVID is the bird flu. right?
It's not exactly that clear. I don't think he thinks COVID is, I think he admits now that there is COVID, but we're not testing for bird flu, for H7 bird flu in people.
And that we all got vaccinated, because that was the other
And
thing.
we all got vaccinated for H7.
Right. Which is bird flu.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
And two different species. And possibly
Sky,
the
can you
same
put it to
virus. Now, are you
1.5?
familiar with the,
Yes,
what's it called? The Huangpa River incident in
No.
China. All right, so in China, this is before 2020, they find a bunch of dead pigs floating down the river in Shanghai.
Oh, wow.
And you can,
I remember this. I mean, I don't know what. Okay.
the audience can look this up. I think it's called the Huangpu. I'll send this to you because I've got it saved.
And night I laid my eyes on you. Felt everything around me move. Got nervous when you looked my way, but you knew all the words to say. And your love slowly moved right in. All this time, no matter where you've been. Mesmerizing every way. Keep me in a state of daze. Kisses make my skin feel weak. Always nothing in your heat. That's all like a burning wind. Oh, I got.
So, I mean, random things like this happen every once in a while when animals get thrown down the river and for various reasons. Sometimes large groups of people end up in rivers. I mean, I don't know. He thinks that this is a conspiracy theory for what?
It's Huangpu River incident. And there's a bunch of dead pigs floating down the river in Shanghai. It's like, how did this happen? This is not a typical scenario. And it's always been something that's stood out to me as incredibly suspicious. Like, all right, what is this? This is not normal. And knowing more about what I know now with the monkey business that's going on in this world, it's scary. And so if that's happening in China, next thing you know, we're killing pigs here. And so this is where the bird flu story, where these two things kind of come together.
So the 2020 bird flu, was that like a highly pathogenic or low pathogenic?
Both.
It was both. Okay.
Starts out as low pathogenic in 2013 in China, and the UNFAO documents it. So the UNFAO says, hey, we've got an outbreak here in China of H5N1 bird flu, and it's starting to go into people. So it's killing chickens, and it's killing, not just chickens, but that's the impact it's having on the food supply. It's also killing geese and whatever. But the impact it's having on the food supply is killing chickens, both roasters and egg layers. And it's now coming into people. And by 2019, it becomes highly pathogenic. 40% case fatality rate. That's like Ebola. That's like Marburg. That's like crazy numbers. 40% case fatality rate in humans. And then there's this massive outbreak in Hubei province in late 2019. And the UNFAO, this is not the WHO, it's the Food and Agriculture Organization. They're documenting all this stuff. So it's all written up. It's like not a mystery. It's like we've got all the documentation that there's this massive bird flu outbreak. Then the USDA tells us we just had the worst bird flu outbreak in history, not just in the United States, but in Europe as well. And the odd thing is that the timing lines up with COVID. And the double odd part is we were told that influenza disappeared. But if influenza disappeared, what do the chickens have?
Influenza disappeared in humans.
Influenza
disappeared because we were settling in homes, so it didn't spread through humans. But that doesn't mean it couldn't spread through animals, right? Like avian influenza.
But influenza, what do you mean it disappeared?
Well, it didn't disappear, but the incidences of influenza were considerably lower. That's what I think he means, right? That during COVID, because we were all in-house and because we were using PPCs, then the whole flu season was down or was not existent. But it was because of humans. It was through humans, not in animals, because we were isolating each other.
Right.
We weren't spreading it.
The birds were still hanging out with each other.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why the fuck. I don't know. Is that not something that we all knew? Like, yeah, no one went outside. Of course, flu numbers went down that year. I mean, what? Most people couldn't fly, and if they did, they were wearing masks. I don't know.
Yeah.
You see and feel. Body lots my feet. It's not a meaningless question. Answers they've been and gone.
Yeah, do you notice that some of those maps have like a spike right after it, like right at the next winter? There's another spike. Look, there's a spike this winter, a spike this winter.
Yeah, and he he's like proof. Here's a barrage of
Yeah.
papers and graphs as proof of what I'm saying instead of
In
like
Jamaica.
describing what he's saying. You know what I mean? So, and we know he just kind of like he grasps on anything to prove his point.
I would at least be interested. Okay, so because we listen to every conspiracy theorist, I would be interested in hearing like, okay, so what about places that didn't quarantine? Places like Norway or Florida where Florida people still did stay home. I know that they were really pretty lax about it, but most people stayed home. But places like Norway, where supposedly people were just hanging out and doing their own thing, did they see a drop in influenza? I would doubt it.
Can we ask ChatGPT while we continue to play this video?
I don't know.
I'll
Who's
ask
got a
it.
paid version of ChatGPT? Okay, great.
I've got a paid
Remember
version.
to talk about North Carolina.
There it is. You see the spikes the next winter.
You see the sides were like glass in the thick of a forest without a road. And if any man's hand ever made that land, the water show.
That's not organic. That's subterfuge. Okay.
The bird flu is avian influenza. It's influenza A. So what do you mean it disappeared? How could it disappear if we're in the midst of the worst bird flu outbreak in the history of mankind?
Yeah.
That sounds like those two things don't really go together. Well, it turns out that the Pentagon was monitoring this bird flu outbreak in China. That's how serious it was. And Moderna was working on bird flu vaccines. And the CDC was working on bird flu vaccines.
Yeah.
And Pfizer were teamed up with BioNTech. What a coincidence. For a bird flu vaccine in 2018. And then Trump ordered vaccines on January 13th when there was one guy dead in Wuhan. And most of the patients in Wuhan, those first patients, the first 40 cases, had bird.
So ChatGPT says that yes, it was also observed that in Norway, influenza largely disappeared because of reduced global travel. Hygiene practices were still being done. Some degree of social distancing were still happening. I also remember this, that even social distancing were still happening there. And there is virus interference, which says that there is some evidence that the dominance of SARS-CoV-2 may have contributed to a lack of space for influenza viruses to spread. And the mask use in some contexts. So while they weren't isolated in the houses, in the homes, they still had like methods to stop the spread or to reduce the spread.
And it also makes sense to me that, international travel was at an all-time low. So that was also the way the flu travels around the world is in airplanes. So
yeah,
yeah, totally. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Duh. So again, it took you 30 seconds to figure out why this isn't organic. This is subterfuge. What?
Bird flu.
Like, do we not? The thing that always blows my mind is like, do you not remember those days? I was there. We were all there. You don't remember that?
I remember.
Yeah, I feel like no one remembers anything anymore. What other virus did we find in the first patients in Wuhan?
A lot of the things I miss, but don't be unkind. It don't mean I'm blind.
Isn't this cherry picking?
Of course it is. That's what it is. That's what conspiracy.
He's cherry picking data to confirm his. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have said. There it is.
That's why I think Crystal should have just done the claims making right in the beginning, like right off the bat, just instead of trying to pepper it in later. Because I think
that's nice after the fact to know that that's the strategy, but like during it, like, but I get we're criticizing it. This is okay. Yeah, I appreciate that.
I mean, isn't that why you wanted me here? I thought that's why we were doing this. Sorry, I'll shut up if it's not.
No. Keep going. Sorry.
So by the way, in Wuhan there was also influenza B in that time. Influenza A, influenza B, parainfluenza, adenovirus, RSV, rhinovirus, and they were all during the outbreak of COVID in Wuhan at that period. So
yeah,
I stopped watching the first time a little bit after this. I think I got about 35% of the way through this. I think because of this.
You see, it's all clear. You are meant to be here.
One bird captured in 1917. Blah blah blah.
From the beginning. Maybe I might change. Not been so cruel.
Oh yeah, he's obsessed with the 1917. Crystal, will you explain that?
Oh my God, he keeps going on about how
forgot
Trump
about that.
keeps saying the 1917 Spanish flu, 1917 Spanish flu. And he's like, why is nobody correcting him? And he says, because 1917 was the bird flu and it was different than the 1918 Spanish flu. And I'm like, so why is he saying, what is your point here? Why is he saying that then? Is if it's not just a brain fart fuck up? And he
Yeah.
says, then he's like, because it's a bird. I don't know if he thinks that behind the scenes they're talking about the 1917 bird flu and that's what's happening now. And
And he
I
finally
honestly,
caught Donald Trump misspeaking. Finally.
yeah,
I mean, he's
he's
usually
saying what they say
impeccable.
behind the scenes,
Yes.
like in public 50 times. Well, and then he says, why isn't his assistant like elbowing him and telling him that it's really 1918?
Nobody
Well,
did
why
that when he
isn't
told
she?
people to inject bleach. I mean, come on.
Because he says a lot of shit
He's Donald
all day
Trump.
long.
stupid,
He's
yeah.
Donald Trump.
If you take anything he says seriously, you'll end up like me, crazy.
And so, yeah, assistants aren't going to correct him all the
No,
time.
no one will
They
correct
don't.
them. No, of course not.
Anyway.
Whatever was done is done. I just can't recall. It doesn't matter at all.
Like he even searched for it, you see? Like you see the H7 search. Like this just shows the cherry picking that he tried
Control
to do.
F, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You see, it's all clear. You are meant to be here from the beginning.
Like just a barrage of data. It's like, what are you trying to prove?
Yeah.
And regarding the mRNA vaccine, I remember that during that period, they were talking about a universal flu vaccine made with the mRNA vaccine because they could have targeted the not the protein on the virus like the normal vaccines do, but rather the body of the virus, which would have been something novel and could have gotten us a universal flu vaccine, which is something amazing. But yeah, it was also during that time, so that yeah.
Yeah. The interesting thing about the whole Spanish flu is, it was during World War I, and none of the other armies wanted to say that they were sick, because they didn't want to, give the other team an advantage. I don't know how to describe this, but Spain wasn't in the war. And they were like, hey, we're getting sick. And we're having all these losses and everything. So they were the only one talking about it. So that's why we called it the Spanish flu when everybody else was actually sick, but they didn't want to say anything because they didn't want
Yeah, people were dying in the trenches. There's lots of people who think, how Gandhi got extremely ill and started thinking that he was, that his karma had caught up to him and all this. People think it was the flu. But he was never diagnosed. No one knew what the hell people had back then. I mean, people still were.
There were no rapid tests.
They were cutting people's legs off without anesthesia back then. I mean, like all sorts of horrible shit. God damn,
crazy times.
Yeah, I'm so glad I lived
right? When
in
was
this century. Yeah, a lot of people died of infection. I think penicillin was like 1926 or something like that.
Yeah, God.
Yeah. Anyway, not good times. World War I.
Both two. One of them also had the mosaic virus.
28. I was
And hear about
close.
that.
Interesting.
They were co-infected, and the number one comorbidity of COVID was influenza.
Interesting. I mean, they've done a ton of gain of function research on H5N1 too here, even at the University of Wisconsin.
The thing is, though, H5N1, the WHO tracks it. So if we go to the WHO's flu mart, they track H5N1. And in the last 20 years, in people, there haven't been 1,000 cases globally in 20 years. And in the past year, in 2024, there weren't 75 cases on Earth in people. Now we're finding it in animals all over the place. So in your world, it's like overwhelming right now. It's like it's everywhere. It's like the cattle, it's in the chickens, it's in the porpoises, it's in the sea manatees, it's in the field mice. It's like, guys, what's with the H5N1 everywhere? What's going on? Not 75 cases in people on Earth. 2 died. And BARDA ordered 4.8 million vaccines. These things don't go together. It's like peanut butter and toothpaste. I mean, it's like, no. What do you tell? Well,
I kind of
What
like that.
what they order what of how many vaccines? Well, we're all along, worried about an influenza pandemic. So it's not unheard of. And I think I make that argument anyway. I don't know.
So he's saying that you influenza vaccines there was influenza vaccines? Is that what he's saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
What do you say here in response to his diatribes here? Is there any?
I don't know. To me, I feel like. Well, Chip does more outreach than I do these days. I've done a lot, but I might have done more in my life than Chip. But Chip does more every single day now. So, Chip, how do you keep people on point and keep them from going on these crazy?
I learned more and more
tangents?
to ask questions. Yeah, interrupt them and ask questions. Interrupt them, say, I'm sorry for interrupting you, and asking questions. I know it sucks to interrupt them. Some people get offended, and the people that get offended, eventually you have to let them finish, unless they continuously talk, but then interrupt
I was
them.
trying to, what would be a good question here to interrupt him with? I was trying to think of something.
I mean, to be honest, Crystal, the way this guy talks is like, what the hell is this guy even saying? I feel like
Well, I
he's
think the
touching on
question
so
is
many
why?
points, making so much nonsense. Yeah,
Well,
the
why?
good question is why.
Because
Yeah,
he's just saying, well, why do you think? Because if he's one of those guys that says, well, I'm just asking questions. I mean, that goes together like peanut butter and toothpaste, which is funny, and it makes me laugh. And also all the pages flying by, it's like, oh, this guy really done his research. It's all building his authority.
But of course, this was all edited after the fact.
Right.
During our conversation, there was no
totally.
pages. Yeah.
Totally. I get that. But then, I guess I would just, well, why do you think that is, John? Well, why do you think that is?
Well,
Because
you say, why do you think that is? Then he'll go on his longer diatribe explaining further why he
because
thinks
then it'll open me up and be able to go, well, don't you think that there's an easy way to keep this from ever happening, John? What would be the way to keep this from ever going
well,
down?
no, because his argument is it's all Anthony Fauci who, is trying to cover up this gain of function. We need to hold Anthony Fauci accountable. That's his answer.
Anthony Fauci is like the ultimate evil,
Yeah,
but it would still need a delivery method. How are we all getting it?
Sadly, I think the only method with this person is to bring out a whiteboard and write down all of the key points that he's making, because I think his methodology of creating a conspiracy theory is creating this complexity and moving one arrow to another complexity to prove a point that maybe is non-existent. But if you put it on a whiteboard and somehow draw it as a graph or something, I think you could perhaps see a bit more nonsense. Because honestly, from that whole map thing where he started and where we're at now, I feel like already what
anyway, keep going. Let's get
what
through this.
BARDA ordered 4.8 million vaccines for H5N1, and there were 75 cases on Earth and 2 people died.
Well, I think the concern is that we've had influenza pandemics throughout history, and they always crop up every few years. I mean, we had the 1918 Spanish flu, 1957 to 58 Asian flu, which was H2N2, 1968 to 69 H3N2, 1997 H5N1. So it's like we're worried about this. So it's not a surprise, but it's hard to get the right information. And I know even right now with H5N1, we're not testing enough people, and we're doing all this gain of function research when we should just be looking and testing who's out there.
Well, I mean, basically
being transparent about it.
Well, the gain of function is, making these things worse, right? I mean, if you run it through 100 generations, you can do some pretty wild things. I mean, what you can do with dogs. I mean, come on, you'll get a Doberman Pinscher and a Chihuahua. I mean, so imagine what you can do with viruses over 100 generations doing this.
So wait, is his?
So I think the challenge here.
He's likening
Yeah, that the virus can evolve, or it can be mutated, like how we did with dogs, right? But he started with H7N9, then made his point about H5N1. These are different viruses. I know they're both avian influenza by name, but they are different viruses. They're different strains, right? So I fail to see what the connection is between them. Maybe I'm getting lost in this. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm getting a little lost too, honestly.
Okay.
Is that we were in the midst of a bird flu outbreak. and it was H7N9.
That's what he's
That's what appeared
doing.
to have killed all the chickens. In other words, that's documented. The H7N9
Yeah.
bird flu outbreak is documented.
So yeah,
The
he's
reason
still
I don't know
talking
about
about H7N9.
But
Yeah,
to
so
what
his whole
end?
point, no, so his whole point is because they're both called avian influenza, because that was a vaccine against H5N1, right? And this is H7N9, and the other things that he was searching were H5. So I'm like, I don't think he realizes that these are different strains.
No, I think he does. Let's keep playing.
Let's keep going, yeah.
Is because it was being covered up. And the reason it was being covered up is because the gain of function on H7N9 was done in 2014. A lot of people want to know, why did Dr. Fauci's pardon go back to 2014?
Oh,
2014, Dr. Yoshihiro Kawaoka at University of Wisconsin does gain of function on H7N9 3 weeks after the pause.
But he also did
And
gain of function
also
on
is trying
H5N1.
to figure out, is there some sort of cross pathogenicity thing between Ebola and influenza? All right, so this happens in 2014 in November.
I mean, he also did like H1N1, an antigenic escape study in 2014 too.
So
like,
he did an
that's what I'm
H1N1
talking
to
about.
kind of to taunt Taubenberger. Taubenberger got the material from Johann Holton in Alaska and Breivik Mission. And Yoshihiro Kawaoka says, I don't need the material, idiot. I'll synthesize it. And that's what he did. And then Warraby got the tissue samples from England on the slides from underneath the bed of somebody. And that was from 1917. Taubenberger realizes the 1917 Spanish flu and the 1918 Spanish flu were two different strains. 1917 was a bird flu. 1918 was H1N1. And they're not really closely related. It's not like one gave rise to the other. It's like they're distant cousins. So Taubenberger writes the paper on this. And the big difference, so the weird thing with both of them, the 1917 Spanish flu and 1918 Spanish flu, neither of them need trypsin. Neither of them need an ACE receptor, an ACE2 receptor.
Okay,
And what that
we can
means
stop
is,
here,
even though they're
'cause,
influenza
like,
viruses,
I don't think that's true, but and
what I'm
he
looking
really
at.
should show some data to prove that that's true. And I should have asked, like, do you have proof of that? But I was just like processing. So anyway,
This whole thing reminds me of this meme. Have you guys seen this meme?
Yeah.
This is really
It's giving.
Yeah. Crypto energy, like Crypto Bro explains to this Paris Hilton looking woman, like it just but what you don't get is that the receptors of the thing was the same as the 1917, and he doesn't need that shit. And I don't know who was that, whatever.
they can infect any organ easily because they don't need this trypsin protein to enter the cell, and they don't need special receptors. They're
Trust me, I'm a
very dangerous. They can
cartographer.
infect your kidneys. They basically infect any organ they want, your nervous system, your circulatory system. They can pass the blood-brain barrier. And the difference between 1918 and 1917, according to Taubenberger, 1917 Spanish flu, the bird flu, the avian iteration, caused encephalitis lethargica, which is sleeping sickness. That was the subject of the book Awakenings,
Yeah.
right? So sleeping sickness, encephalitis lethargica, these symptoms. Now, is it as dramatic as what you saw in the movies? Obviously not. But that's the 2% of the cases look like that. And I start wondering, so wait a second, is long COVID sleeping sickness? Is long COVID encephalitis lethargica that was caused by the worst bird flu
And
pandemic?
like here, like all viruses can cause neurologic symptoms. It's not doesn't mean
Right.
that they're the same thing because they both cause the similar symptoms. Anyway,
Because all sorts of viruses do that.
yeah.
Like tons of viruses do that. The epidemiologist that we had, what was his name? He was great. I forget his name right now, but
Yeah, Michael.
Michael, yeah, he was great, and he was telling me like all sorts. He actually brought up encephalitis lethargica. He's like, man, COVID, we're not going to really know the effects until 10 years from now, and it's all sorts of viruses that have these lasting effects that you don't know.
Yeah,
scares me because I'm such a princess. But yeah, I definitely feel.
I did not mean offense. I'm just.
I was horribly offended. Obviously, I won't let it go.
By the way,
keep me up at night.
So in 1917, there were no reported cases of avian influenza. In 1917, there was no such thing as avian influenza, so there couldn't be any reported cases because the first case of avian influenza being documented was in 1997 in Hong Kong. So there were some livestock and bird population that may have experienced undiagnosed respiratory disease. However, virology was at its infancy. So yeah. And yes, there was a British camp next to France that had an outbreak of a respiratory disease between 1916 and 1917. with symptoms similar to the Spanish flu. And because this camp was close to poultry farms, some people have speculations that this may have been an avian virus, but there is no data to back this up. So there is no confirmed evidence of avian influenza outbreak in 1917. So it's bullshit.
Yeah.
What?
Do you think that the 1918 Spanish flu was avian influenza? Because many reports are that it's possibly avian origin.
There's a speculation. That's also what it says here.
And
Could
then
be.
the 1957 and 1958 Asian flu, H5N1, that was a reassortment of avian and human influenza viruses in East Asia. So
Am I the only one who asks why the hell any of it matters? What does it matter if it was of avian flu or not? Why do we want to get to the bottom of this so hard?
Well, because he's asking, why are we developing avian influenza vaccines? And I'm saying because it's been a threat. And he brings up also Obama saying that, what if we have an outbreak of influenza in 5 years? And I'm like, we've all been worried about an influenza
There's literally
pandemic
a board game
for a
called
long
Pandemic because of this. Like there's
And the computer game.
Yeah, there's movies. Have you not seen Outbreak? That shit came out in the 90s. Like we've all been worried
And there's
about
also
a super flu, we've called it for years.
And there's also a part of the government that's supposed to handle this kind of stuff and build up resources in cases like this, right? As far as I know.
Yeah. So I know my point, and I was just going through like the influenza pandemics throughout history. 1968, 1969, H3N2 reassortment of avian and human influenza viruses. 1997, H5N1 in Hong Kong. That was bird to human transmission. So that was like you say that's the first known one, but the ones before that were possibly avian influenza origin too. So it's
fair enough.
Cool.
I guess that's the only one that was defined that way, right? Like as avian influenza.
All right.
Okay.
Moving on.
Am I stupid? Am I stupid? Because it's still. So he's saying that okay. So what if I say he's right? Okay, it was always bird flu. So what? What does that matter today? What does it matter? What happened?
He wants to expose the truth.
I think his whole point is that all the vaccine, that it was a ruse to pay pharma companies to create a vaccine that probably we already have or something, or to create a vaccine that we didn't really need. I don't know. It's something about the government paying the pharma companies money that they didn't really use or need. That's something along those lines.
Yeah, so just like a truther when it comes to we were all locked in our houses and sold this thing, even though none of us paid out of pocket, but it was the government paid for it with our tax dollars and therefore enriched these oligarchs, I guess.
Yeah.
Something like that? Okay.
When there was only one guy dead with SARS-CoV-2 and all these other people in China dying from bird flu.
Startlingly, these documents reveal there was an enormous spike in influenza cases in Hubei, right when studies have shown the very first known patients were infected with COVID-19, 20 times the number of flu cases compared to the same week the year before. Experts said it could have flooded the hospital system with patients sick from flu-like symptoms, but they show flu patients were regularly screened, and many did not have a known flu virus strain. The documents also show the flu outbreak was biggest that first week in December, not in Wuhan, but in 2 other cities nearby in Hubei. All valuable information in the hunt for where the disease came from.
Why are we buying COVID vaccine? Moderna didn't even have a COVID vaccine. Moderna had an H5N1 vaccine in development. So did the CDC and so did Pfizer.
Didn't they have a SARS-CoV-1 vaccine that they've been working for a while?
Now, SARS-CoV-2 exists. EcoHealth Alliance built it. EcoHealth Alliance worked with Dr. Shi in Wuhan with bats. That whole backstory and all that David Martin crap about all that, that's all true. EcoHealth makes viruses.
We're here in a fairly small poultry market near Guilin in China, and what we're doing here is we're looking at the way animals are produced and sold live and shipped from one place to another across China. And what this is a huge risk to spread diseases, and we're trying to work with the Chinese government to stop diseases from emerging through this process. We're working with farmers. We're testing their animals. We're looking for viruses that could be lethal to chickens and to people, like the avian flu pandemic, and trying to stop the next one happening. And this is the middle of China. China is a hotspot for emerging diseases. We've got a river nearby with domestic ducks on, with people fishing. We've got open sewers coming down into the river. So this is a great place, unfortunately, for a pathogen, and a really bad place for health. So we're trying to do our best to help the Chinese government, the Chinese people, make this safer for them and safer for us.
Good time to like the video, everybody.
And
Like
the
the
CIA
video.
calls EcoHealth and says, "Hey, Peter Daszak, we need help. This H5N1 virus from Wisconsin is."
So do you have evidence of the CIA calling, or is this speculation at this point?
There's a CIA agent that I co-published with in the past named Michael Callahan. He was in Wuhan in the fourth quarter of 2019. He called me from Wuhan on January 4th. And he told me, "Robert, you got to get your team spun up because we got a problem with this new virus."
This is Joe Rogan's show. God, this is why you pissed off that lady, Crystal, right there. You dared to ask him for evidence.
No, so Brad Wenstrup put together a letter. I'll send this to you as well.
Okay.
To the Inspector General of the CIA, and said the CIA met with Dr. Fauci and he didn't sign in, and we've got a whistleblower that will testify to this. You want to tell us more? Why was the CIA meeting with Dr. Fauci? And 2 weeks later, Brad Wenstrup announced his retirement.
Don't you think the CIA would regularly meet with the head virologist in the world? I mean, whatever you think about Fauci, whether or not you think he's a slime ball, or because I've got mixed feelings about the guy too.
I don't.
You don't?
Are
You
you
think
pro Fauci? Or you
I
don't have
actually
any-
like how he handled the COVID vaccine in some ways. There are ways that he could have handled it better, don't get me wrong, but I thought he did well. And considering all the pressure that he was under during those times, I think he handled it pretty well. I mean, who amongst us would millions of people are dying? You have enough pressure. I think he handled it decently.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think any of us should be a pick-me for Fauci, who is probably controlled by pharmaceutical companies, and I think we should question all of that and these whole systems, and just knowing how doctors are groomed and elevated into positions of power when they go along with things and don't question things. So I think for that reason, we should question anybody in positions of power.
But
How about
Crystal,
him?
I feel like the problem is, you know, the reason why I like Fauci or why I liked how he handled the COVID vaccine, because I didn't know anything about him before that, was because he had inline advice with a lot of other experts that weren't coming from US. You know, it's not like, yeah, okay, pharma companies have a big stronghold in US because of the system that you guys have, where pharma companies get to price the customers directly. But in everywhere else in the world, except for 2 countries, US and 1 in Africa, I think, pharma companies don't have to go to the government, and they have government regulations how they price companies, how they price customers. So it's not like they have that much power outside of US. So I don't think it's the case that if in anywhere else outside of US they say similar advice, that it's because of pharma companies.
I think because all of the people who rise to the top are people who don't question authority enough. I don't know, Sky, what were you going to say before I?
Well, okay, there's people throughout history. We've had a bunch of people who have saved our asses. Fritz Haber comes to mind. He was one of the guys that fed the world, invented the Haber cycle in order to capture nitrogen and put it and make artificial fertilizer to prevent famine around the world, saved billions of lives potentially. Is also the same guy that invented Cyclone A, chlorine gas, and all sorts of horrific shit that made people die in the worst ways possible in World War II. Like, it's the same guy. Fauci is exactly the same to me. Whether
I don't know
however
about
you
anything
feel-
else other than his handling of the COVID vaccine. By
Fauci
the way,
hand signed off on all sorts of disgusting experiments on animals, where they put cages on animals' heads and had them, and then put biting insects inside of the box, and just watched these dogs get their faces eaten alive by insects. Like, that's just one, but like the forced inhalation stuff during COVID, that they tried to give beagles all of these different diseases through their lungs in order to test different shit on them, different therapeutics. Like, this is Dr. Mengele level shit that might be par for the course in the circles that people like Fauci roll in, but to me, I'm with Crystal on this. Yeah, he went along with that type of shit, even though as he got more and more power, he just signed off on more and more shit like that, regardless of all the mountains of evidence that show us that it's entirely irrelevant for human. It's just not human irrelevant, these experiments. And he just happily went along with it. Why? Probably for the paycheck. And yeah,
But what involvement did he have in all of these experiments? I think I asked last time.
Some he helped carry out, but not in his old age. He's an old guy, but he signed off on them. He read them. Yeah. It's his signature at the bottom of them.
Is it confirmed that he has read them? Because as you said, when you get into these high powers, a lot of the times you just sign things that are given to you.
The buck stops at him, man. Come on, it's his.
Fair enough. I'm not saying that he shouldn't be responsible for it. That's not what I'm saying.
That's like saying, did Hitler know what was going on in Auschwitz? Did he visit?
Well,
like,
of course
no,
he
his
didn't know.
signature was at the bottom of the paper that said the final solution was a good idea. Yeah, it wasn't his idea, but he signed off on it. That's him.
But okay, so do you guys have any thoughts on how the origins of COVID-19? Do you think that it was a lab leak, or do you think that it was,
spillover?
You think it was from the wet markets?
Not from the wet markets necessarily, but it was a spillover from other from animals, right? And it most closely related to coronaviruses found in bats, rat G13, who has 96% genetic similarity to SARS-CoV-2. It's pretty high.
So what do you think of the great Catherine Ebans? I don't know if you saw the article in Vanity Fair about the lab leak theory and how the FBI is, more leaning to the lab leak theory, the CIA as well.
The intelligence community of the United States is leaning towards, and that was before Trump, so can't blame him on that one either.
Even if it were to be, I feel like, just to make it clear, even if it were to be a lab leak, I don't think that means it's human made. I think we need to distinguish between that. Lab leak could have just been a virus that they found and they were studying and it was leaked, but not that it was made by humans, because I feel like that's where most people go to when they say the lab leak theory.
Yeah,
that there was a weaponized.
I don't believe that is true. I believe that it could have been maybe a leak from the lab, because there was a lab there were people, they were handling viruses. Of course, we are all humans. We know how humans are. They might be highly, I don't know.
But they were doing gain of function research at this Wuhan lab, right? And the Wuhan lab, see, this is what I think is probably a little bit of both. I think it was man-made in that it was an existing virus that we all knew about. Just like always, they were growing them on like E. coli cells or some shit. And then they were trying to get them to be a super bug. That's what they do in those labs, these gain of function research. And then it got out and it got into the human population via these wet markets, people eating bats,
Well, but the scientists' lack of candor about their inventory, as well as their years of work manipulating coronaviruses to determine the changes necessary to infect humans, added to the circumstantial evidence, indicated that the outbreak might have started among Wuhan. Wuhan infectious. What does that?
Yeah.
WIV stand for? Researchers. And then, of course, Zengali and a WIV administrator did not respond to requests for comment.
Yeah, shocker.
So,
I mean,
Wuhan Institute of Virology, that's what it stands for.
Part of me is again, I'm going to say, why does it matter? At the end of the day, we got fucked. I mean, whether or not it was, I don't think if it was a leak, it was intentional. I don't think that we were
I don't think
victims of an attack.
Exactly. That's the whole point of it, right? Like, even if they were mutating viruses, I don't think the point was ever to infect somebody, but rather to understand the viruses more, right?
But I think also it just speaks to, in science and medicine, the cover-up culture of it, and how people who do speak out and do want to find the truth are viewed as just unhinged conspiracy theorists. Because I think of all of the researchers who were dismissed talking about this lab leak theory when
Were they
we
dismissed? I
should be
mean,
all about science and we
But
should
maybe
be
they
all about
have
discovery.
maybe they have NDAs. I don't know. I don't know what these people are working in these companies. I signed an NDA for working in a company that does freaking what is it, like CRMs for big
I've
companies. It
signed
is
so many
nothing.
NDAs in my life,
Yeah.
man. I just like you're probably right. They probably do also. They're probably all under NDA. You're probably right.
But why does it seem that any organization or business that makes you sign an NDA is always doing shitty stuff?
Well, we weren't doing
or
shady
they've been
stuff,
burned.
but yeah, it's usually because they've been burned. It's usually because some leak of information can either be blown out of proportion, like they do, or that they can be used for things to lower their stock or whatever. Companies are.
Yeah, I mean, I've signed do not compete clauses, and like I'm not a high level,
Also, same.
Like I've done so many of these freaking things I've had to sign. So I'm guessing like Wuhan lab monkeys are probably signing some pretty heavy shit. But I guess Crystal's saying is that like, yeah, but we all made fun of people who said that it was a lab back then.
Yeah, and there's just, this is science. We should have open discussion and communication about this research being done, and that just wasn't happening here. And so I think that's the big problem we need to talk about, is how do we do science and research and also maintain some transparency about it.
I guess we do it before the outbreak, right? I guess this is the problem. During the outbreak, there was so much, like a lot of stuff, because Donald Trump and because of Joe Biden, blame them both equally if you want, they were politicizing it. It was a political issue rather than a public health issue. And so like all that transparency and stuff, it's really difficult when you're in the trenches and people are dying. We're literally putting bodies into trenches. There's New York, they had those refrigeration trucks filled with corpses, and we want to have this, we're trying to litigate it as it's happening. I think that's a huge mistake. And so it doesn't bother me that people were trying to put the kibosh on all of these doubts when all we were trying to do was get people to wash their hands, wear masks, and stay inside.
And this is how atrocities happen, because it all makes sense at the time to like keep it quiet and not question authority.
Yeah,
but
true.
then we end up in situations like this, and this is happening on such a small scale at every lab across the country right now. And that's the big issue. This is
Which is
happening
why
in
I think now's the time to talk about it, right? Like it's kind of like right after a school shooting, I think it's a perfect time to talk about gun control. But like while the kids are being shot, I kind of want to let's just get the shooting to stop. Do you know what I mean? You could say that like, well, let's litigate this while there's still an active shooter, but that doesn't make any sense. Let's stop the active shooter, then let's address so it never happens again.
Anyway,
we
moving
never
on.
do that. But do we want full transparency? What are we doing here? I'm sorry. But
I
like,
think we want full transparency if you're doing scientific research with viruses and bacteria. We need full transparency. If we ask you a question, you need to answer. And no, I don't like this whole NDA stuff.
I agree with that,
especially related to animal research and anything to do with animals that can't consent.
But can we also foresee a problem? Like I agree, maybe exactly full transparency could help, but we could also foresee an issue where people who are like this guy on the right side, I've already forgot his name, who can look at some data, not properly interpret it, and make theories out of some data. Like he can cherry pick some data and make some theories out of it. So you can also understand this other perspective where some people are not showing the full picture because some of the items in that could potentially be seen as dangerous by the public, as to not cause hysteria or stuff like that, right? Like I understand that it could also mean hiding shit, but it could also mean the opposite, where you're hiding it.
But doesn't full transparency mean we can have that debate though?
This is the exact argument that we hear in vet school for why we can't be fully transparent about the things we do to animals, and that why researchers need to not talk to activists, and zoo vets need to not talk to activists or not let people photograph things, is because they will take stuff and use it out. Animal activists will take stuff and use it out of context to tell their narrative and to get donations. And it's unfair. And I'm like, no, well, the problem is we vets don't like tell our side of the story and, you know, let a lot of activists say a lot of stuff that isn't true and smearing, and to the point where veterinarians are committing suicide because of attacks by animal rights activists. That's not good. So we need to
Fair.
like not vilify people and not, you know, threaten people and try to take away their license for having an opinion that's different than ours. But I think the answer isn't secrecy and keeping things quiet, because that only allows those in positions of power to get away with a lot of harm. So that's
I
how
mean,
those
I'm
in positions of power maintain their power, is because they know they can shut up and not say anything, and everybody will just go along with it.
So can I just
I
make?
mean, I'm learning. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
I agree with everything you said, but I don't think that the solution. Okay, so yes, call for transparency, perfect. But how will we ever have that if we trust all of these private companies? We've basically privatized everything. Instead of
Yeah,
having
that's not gonna
companies,
work.
you know, like we can't FOIA Pfizer,
Neuralink.
yeah, Neuralink. We can't FOIA them. And so what we've done, we've put everything in these walled gardens, and we have no access. And so we, the people, are completely benighted. And so if what we really should be doing is taking those companies and, well, put them in the hands of the workers, or making them government, just making them back to be a government agency, which is what we were supposed to be doing in the first place. Like this idea that, well, they're so much more efficient. Well, great, but then we have this other problem, don't we?
But we also have to remember companies are made up of people. And the reason people keep quiet is because they fear bullying and retaliation by those in
Well,
leadership. They
whistleblowers are
lost
crucified, right?
opportunities.
Yeah.
We need to do more to celebrate the whistleblower and to make sure that they are not going to suffer consequences as a result of them telling their story or
Yeah,
anything.
I mean, two whistleblowers
we-
last year got murdered by Boeing, and no one's talking
Yeah.
about it. So, I mean,
Should we get rid of NDAs? Is that what we're saying?
Especially when it's around animals and research, I think so. And animal rights organizations shouldn't be having people sign
Yeah,
NDAs,
I
especially.
agree.
yeah. Yeah, I don't think we should have NDAs at all. I don't think why should there be an NDA? If you're doing something that you're so afraid anybody's going to say, it's just like the ICE agents wearing masks. I've been saying this since the ICE agents started rounding people up. When you have policemen wearing masks, then they're doing shit they're not supposed to be doing. Well, we could have been doing it behind closed doors at a jail, but these sanctuary cities, they're the problem. You shouldn't be doing that shit.
In private companies, NDAs usually are for the sake of to save the stock, right, from not divulging secrets towards
Yeah, but that's a lie. That's what they
competitors.
say. That's bullshit. That's not true, though. That's just what they say, Chip. It's to protect
Well, I mean,
our
it would be
proprietary
great to
information.
get the
I mean-
email list of some of these big companies like Apple and use it for your own purposes. So I can see why, you know, they should make rules for people not doing that and like releasing
Yeah, I had
technology
access.
to other companies.
So the company I worked for had as customers Apple. I worked on Apple's databases. Had customers as the government. When I had to work for the U.S. government, they had to do a background check on me. So I also had access to that. Imagine if I had looked through their data and said stuff, right? So
And I guess they should have treated you better. You know what I mean? Then the corporation should have
Yeah, paid
treated
me
you better, so you don't do shit like that. Okay.
Fair
And
enough.
also that's also theft. You don't need an NDA for that. If you steal someone's information and then sell it or give it to somebody else, that's theft. That's corporate espionage. We have laws about that. That's not protected. Just NDA. That's like saying if we got rid of the NDA, all of our employees would share all these email lists or steal our proprietary technology. Well, proprietary technology is protected by patents, and their information is protected by corporate espionage laws. That's against the law to do what you're describing.
Anyway.
But there is something. I'm sorry, I don't want to get this discussion too long, but we can all agree that we don't want full transparency of 100% of the information, right? Like it's clear that us three would do well with information. We are critical thinkers. We don't just take information and trust it. We question it, right? Whereas any other individual who might see one form of information or somebody else interpret it the wrong way and according again to the same anchoring bias, they may always think that because of that information. So there is something to be said about not all information needs to be public information.
I mean, I feel like that argument was made against me for discussing internally the misconduct of a man. And the way they said that the way that I was talking about it led people to believe certain things that weren't true. And no, that was them reframing the whole discussion as an effort to smear me. But like, I feel like that's another thing that people say is like, oh, you have to be careful about the way you talk about this, like infantilizing people because of the risk that some people might take it the wrong way, or like this is this is the reason why we say don't worry, the milk is safe, the risk to the public is low, because we don't want to foster panic. So who's to decide what information is going to foster panic? It's always those in positions of power who are the ones we should be questioning, and who are the ones who need to be more transparent. So
but I'm not saying I'm not saying that what I just said now can't be abused. Of course it can. Like, we as humans will abuse any sort of this kind of stuff, right? Like any of these rules that we put in place, we can abuse and hide stuff that shouldn't be hidden. But surely we cannot say that absolutely 100% of the information needs to be shown. So then you got to ask yourself, where does that line need to be drawn, and what is the best, I guess, legal way, because this is a legal thing and all sorts of, and I don't have enough legal knowledge on the matter. What is the best legal way to make this also to align legal with morality, right? Because what you're talking about, Crystal, are kind of immoral acts, whereas certain information, when they're being hidden, they're hidden for the sake of some form of moral thing, right? Where
No, they're being hidden because of cupidity. They're being hidden for greed. They're not being hidden. This is the
not always.
Almost always. If you're doing something in secrecy, it's because you're embarrassed and you don't want it getting out. We have this idea, like, okay, John Stuart Mill was the one who's talked about like the marketplace of ideas. And yeah, the marketplace of ideas is treacherous, especially these days with social media, that a lie will travel 10 times faster than a truth. But truth generally does win out. And so when you do have transparency, and you don't have all this shit in the shadows, you're able to have a robust discussion by limiting the spectrum of our arguments, which is what you're suggesting by saying that some things are off limit to talk about. It keeps us stupid and unable to ask questions, or at least unable to get the answers to our questions. And so, yeah, you're right. Maybe John Cullen might come to different conclusions than somebody else, given the same information.
Yeah.
But if they all had the same information and the same access to information, you would at least be able to have those conversations. Right now, you can't. You can't really argue with John Cullen.
I don't have a strong opinion on this, to be honest. Like it's just at the top of my head the way I see it, because I have been in a lot of companies and we have done a lot of secret stuff, and the whole purpose behind it was because of competition more than anything. Money and competition. Yeah.
Man, I don't know. I'm a big freedom of speech person. I'm sorry if I'm letting that flag.
No, I appreciate it.
Like, it scares the hell out of me, this idea that we're supposed to keep shit secret from the public, especially like Crystal's saying, shit about bacteria and testing on dogs or whatever. Like, the reason why people don't, dude, at VMX, to hear people who are carrying out the extermination of large groups of animals say that what they want is more transparency and public opinion to weigh in. To hear that blew my fucking mind.
Yeah.
To hear a guy who say, I kill millions of animals and I want to find out what the public feels about it, because I think we're doing it wrong.
I agree, but I don't know. Like I don't know where you like like I agree that maybe like the whole freedom of speech from information shouldn't be hidden by the government. Maybe I say maybe because I have no knowledge of what the government 100% does and whether some information could potentially cause panic or stuff like that. But the private companies, you can't really control them. And if you do control them, well, to what extent? Because I had my own private company when I was young, and did I have to give out every information, a log of everything we did? Did
But that's my
we
point,
have
Chip.
to?
That was my whole point, dude. My point was that we privatized all these companies. We can't control. You're right. I can't force them to do things because that would
Yeah.
also be coercion, right? Or
Yeah.
some form of authoritarianism. Which is why I think that the people should be in control of these companies, or we should have the government actually carrying out these things. Like
if they work for the government, you're right. Companies that work for the government should have full transparency on their
absolutely.
work with
That's
the
where the
government.
money's
You're
coming
right.
from.
That's
Yeah.
I fully agree with this. And full transparency, by the way, FYI, full transparency doesn't necessarily mean that you have immediate easy access, but could also mean that you would need a form of a permit where you would have to have certain amount of knowledge in order to
Or
get
a
that permit.
FOIA request. We
Or
should
a
get a
FOIA
Freedom
request,
of
whatever it is.
Information
Yeah.
Act.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that. Yeah.
Like I can't FOIA Pfizer, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
And we never heard from the Inspector General of the CIA. I posit that the conversation went a little bit like this. Tony, you want us to hide a bird flu pandemic? 4 times more people just died in Australia than the year before, and you want us to hide this? Any suggestions, Tony? Call Peter Daszak. He's got viruses in development in Wuhan. Find a virus that presents with pneumonia. And if you're smart, you'll find a virus that's got all kinds of bells and whistles on it. Like a fishing lure. It's got the rattling, and it's got the holograms, and it's got the day glow. You want a virus like that. So if there's one in there that's got GP120, or if it's got the CGG sequence, if you're in cleavage site, pick something like that. You'll drive all the lab rats crazy for 10 years.
What's he
Peter
showing
Daszak
here?
and Michael Callahan from the CIA
What is
release SARS-CoV-2.
I think he's showing
Cover up
like
the damage being done
the
by H5N1.
COVID
And H5N1
virus
test kits
or an influenza
are kicking off
virus
the market in
attached to
January
a cell
2020.
and infecting the cell.
We had to change things that were done. We had to change things that were done in testing. We had to change things that were.
Today, the director of the CDC testifying before Congress, fielding questions about the delay in getting test kits to health providers around the country.
The CDC's focus was to provide testing for the public health system. There's a whole other system we need testing for, clinical medicine. And I'm happy to say now, with LabCorp and Quest both operational as of yesterday, there's really laboratory testing availability to any doctor's office that can go through LabCorp and Quest.
You can't find a virus that's not in the PCR test. If I took H3N8 out of your PCR test that you test dogs, you'd never find influenza in dogs because H3N8 is the dominant strain of influenza in dogs and horses. So if I took H3N8 out of your PCR test, all the horses that were sick would come back and say, no, it's fine. H7N9 is not in the PCR test. That's how you hide a pandemic. Fauci explains this. There are no H7N9 commercial tests. BioFire, Eplex, Panther, they're in there. So the bird flu outbreak is real, deadly. SARS-CoV-2 is real. But SARS-CoV-2 didn't kill 1/4 of the egg-laying chickens on Earth. That wasn't COVID.
Dozens of outbreaks of 2 separate strains of avian influenza have led authorities in South Africa to call back about 7.5 million chickens, about 20 to 30% of the country's total stock. The outbreaks have threatened to create a shortage of eggs and poultry for consumers, according to the government and National Poultry Association. Some grocery stores in Johannesburg were limiting the number of eggs customers were allowed to buy, in some cases to 1 carton of 6 eggs. At least 205,000 chickens have died from bird flu across the country. The government says it is moving to fast-track new import permits for companies to bring in eggs from other countries to ensure sufficient supplies for consumers.
It was bird flu. And the USDA will tell you that was bird flu. And you and I have seen the USDA's reimbursements to these poultry farmers in the tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah, now over $1 billion.
Okay.
To them.
All right. So these are crazy nuts. It's like you talk about buying someone's silence. Did you see the compilation video that I put together with all the different poultry farms are burning down?
The indemnity payments.
Buying people's silence. And like, obviously that's not true. Like these facilities are always having these outbreaks, and they've been getting indemnity payments for years now. I think it started in 2015 with these indemnity payments for the first bird flu outbreak. So it's not like they're buying their silence. These companies lobby for this indemnity protection. So anyway, and I think I do counter that. I don't know if there's anything else I should say here. Like, as he's just going on, is there some question you would interject with if you were in my position, being interviewed and listening to this?
I just don't understand his whole perspective on the rapid tests. Like, what's it? I guess I didn't get his point. What was his point about that? That the rapid tests were testing for H5N1, or?
I guess he's saying, so he's saying that for the COVID tests or whatever tests that the doctors were doing during COVID, they didn't test for H7N9 because that test wasn't in there. So that's why they weren't finding it. So that's how they hid the H7N9 pandemic.
But all of these rapid tests, sometimes they do interact with other viruses. It's not like it's.
But he's saying the H7 wasn't in there, wasn't in any of the tests that they were doing.
Like that it wasn't interacting with that virus in particular, and that it couldn't possibly show a positive result if you had that virus.
Yeah, and I mean, you have influenza A, like any influenza A test would have shown influenza A. So I think his point there was if we did any sort of influenza A test, which we were doing, and we showed that influenza A was decreasing. So that might be a good counter to his argument, is that we saw lower levels of influenza A. Are you saying the H7 test wouldn't have tested, the H7N9 would not have tested positive for influenza A? I think that might nail his argument. Because if we tested, if people did come in, we tested them for influenza A, they were negative. If we subtyped influenza A, if they were positive, and it's like, well, it's not H1N1, it's not whatever the other seasonal flu virus is, we'd probably subtype it to something else. I don't think there's any reports of like non-subtypable influenza A. So yeah, I think his argument, I think that's how you nail him on that.
I guess, yeah. I mean, is this you're going to go through all this trouble to make a few $1 million? Is that all these people are making all this money?
Cover up a H7N9 lab leak that had disastrous results that we need to keep quiet.
It's all to keep something quiet. Got it.
Yeah.
How many people would need to be involved to keep something like that quiet?
Yeah,
and from how many
all the
organizations?
people at Moderna who developed this supposed H7N9 vaccine that we're giving instead of the COVID vaccine, which I think would be incredibly hard to do.
All the doctors that were involved in Operation Warp Speed, all of the people who were involved in Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson, 3 mega companies.
And okay, for the record, everybody's like, oh, it's really hard to keep things quiet. Just look at the whole depopulation with ventilation shut down and how hard it is for veterinarians to speak out about the harms of animal agriculture, which is something that we should all care about. How hard that is. And I think especially in medicine, if you're the one going against and saying what you guys are doing is wrong, when it's all about we have to keep public panic to a minimum and we have to protect this vitally important gain of function research. So I'm not down to buy the argument that it's hard to keep so many people quiet, because I know as a profession, as a veterinarian, I know how people are manipulated into silence. I know how large groups of people are manipulated into silence. And so I know that that's happening with anything to do with research in medicine. Everybody wants to pretend to suck up to those in power.
But it's
Nobody
still
wants
getting
to
out,
speak out because they don't lose their job.
But it's still getting
They still
out.
get out.
It's
Yeah.
still getting out. I mean, this information still
There is
like, I'm sorry, we're spending look at what Tom Homan is literally getting on TV and threatening people with incarceration, and yet people are still leaking out where ICE is going to be next. Talk about a millions of dollars being spent trying to patch up all their leaks. the FBI is full of leaks, and it's constantly people try to. This is an organization that's supposed to keep secrets. That's like the whole thing. That's their thing, is to keep secrets. CIA.
I know medicine, you have a bunch of people who are groomed into silence, and that's how the veterinary profession stays silent about a lot of stuff. And I definitely know that that's happening in research and labs. Like that's a huge problem.
There is a thing called the Grimes conspiracy formula that was developed by David Robert Grimes. It's a mathematical model that says that large-scale conspiracies are highly unstable because people leak information, whether intentionally, whistleblowing, or accidentally. And using the real-world leaks like the Snowden and the FBI forensic scandal, Grimes estimated that a conspiracy theory involving 1,000 people would likely be exposed within 3 years. A conspiracy people involving 100,000 people would be uncovered in less than a year. And for a conspiracy to remain hidden for over 100 years, it would require fewer than 100 people.
I mean, 100 seems unlikely to me. They're like the Hells Angels always said that a conspiracy is you can only keep a secret with 3 people if 2 of them are dead.
But when you're a Hells Angel, which is a marginalized group that's already under attack and people are ready to question, when you're a highly respected group of people, it's a lot harder to go against the grain. I mean, look at the Tuskegee syphilis study. Look at that atrocity and how long it took to bring that to the surface.
That's true.
Look at all of the Cincinnati radiation experiments. And that one study with that surgeon at the Karolinska who was doing the tracheal transplants, like that were horrifying and people were dying. Like there's all of these horrifying studies done on human beings in the modern time that are kept quiet. And one whistleblower, is trying to get it out, but they're facing all this backlash and nobody will listen to them. So that's
I get that no one will listen to them thing. That's true, but I mean the information still gets out, like Tuskegee or things like
70 years later, and still to this day the researchers are going, no, this is an important study and we were being unfairly attacked for it.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot of people who feel like they're being unfairly attacked still.
That's different than saying that you can keep a secret, though, Crystal. Like saying that there's going to be people who
70 years.
But people did know, right? Like it just wasn't in popular culture where we all knew. I mean, there were people around who knew about it and were talking about it. It just wasn't something anybody cared about because it happened to a marginalized group, right? If it had happened to white housewives in the 50s, like
yes, and there were studies done on housewives in the 50s that were also not brought to public attention until much later. I can go through all of those too.
Yeah.
We can keep.
By the way, I don't think I have more than 20 minutes in me. I'm pretty tired.
It's probably late for you, and I'm just about done with this conversation too, because we're just kind of going in circles, and I'm not learning anything.
Tree, did you see that one?
No, I didn't see that. I mean, the problem is with that is that's been like a no. I mean, Cal-Maine, it's had bird flu outbreak and had a poultry facility burned down. I just got FOIA documents of another facility that had bird flu outbreak, and then their facility burned down too. But it's tough because poultry facilities burn down because they're inherently the way that they operate is highly flammable, and they don't put systems in place to stop them from burning down.
But if we saw a peak in poultry fires, in other words, if yes, they burn down on a fairly regular basis, but if all of a sudden, coincident with the outbreak, there were 20, 30, 40 poultry farm fires?
I'd love to see a graph of like if it was more over time, and also these facilities are growing and getting bigger. Are they becoming more risky?
All right. What do you think? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what questions to ask, honestly, except to try to ask him why do you think that everyone go through this trouble? But I guess
I think you need to slow it down with these people and debunk every little claim that they make, like we did now with.
That's not what
I
Crystal's
don't
here
think
to
you
do.
can do anything. Yeah, but I don't think you can do anything else with these kind of people because, like, you get like honestly, I personally got lost in their whole arguments. I got lost in their whole. Well, this is this person here, this person here, this person here. I never heard of this person. This person did this, did this, and like you get lost in all of this information. And of course, it's easy then to make claims or like because then you're like, I'm like, wait, what? And then he's like, wait, you do not know that, or like they go into this whole like that's how these people operate.
Yeah, I guess like Crystal, the only thing that I think is that you have such a powerful message. It's something that resonates with me. It's one of the reasons why I love working with you and why I think that you're a person that needs to get this out there. And if we're gonna like, I just I mean, I'm just gonna reiterate. I just think if you came out like prepared, I want to get this sentence out. Like this is the sentence that I want to say on every podcast that I go on. And
What's
just,
that sentence?
I
to
don't
you
know.
in your-
I don't know exactly what that is, but it would have to be something around the lines of we need to erode people's faith in these corporations that probably are involved in conspiracy theories, like John says, probably are involved in huge, I would say conspiracies to make money, which is what they're actually involved in, right? They're involved in these conspiracies to make money off of you and me, whether or not we consent. And however we formulate that sentence and wordsmith it, I feel like if you're going to go on something like John Cullen, you could be there as an expert to answer his questions, right? But in the very beginning, I feel like you should have. My goal is to say, I said this with Chip as well. Like my goal when I go to when I do street outreach is I just want them to understand what the definition of veganism is and understand why we're vegan. When I do outreach, that's my goal. I'm not actually trying to turn them vegan. I'm trying to get them to understand what a vegan even is so that I can plant those seeds. So that with you have this powerful message that is kind of fucking complicated because you're talking about something that people don't always consider. It's not complicated in the message. It's complicated because people don't even consider what you're talking about until you bring it up. That they're limiting our choices, that your faith in these companies are what is causing you what's causing you harm. It's causing you harm physically, mentally, all the things. It's causing all of us harm because of your faith in these companies and in this food system. Like that's a powerful message.
Yeah, and I think they're trying to they're working very hard to maintain consumer confidence in their company. And while they're taking your money, whether you buy their products or not, and limiting your ability to consume food that's in alignment with your values. And what's your values? Like you would like to be able to eat the food you want that's like nutritionally adequate, tastes good, and doesn't harm anyone. And you don't have that option right now.
Yeah,
because
like
of these
that's
companies.
like if you had a spiel, like an elevator pitch or something that every time you got on and someone asked you to introduce yourself, even if it came out that early in the conversation. I mean, that might be a little extreme, but like as early as fucking possible, get it out so that people know where you stand and what your calling is in this, because it is powerful and people should have heard it. And I don't think they heard it with this guy. And you know what I mean?
Because he controlled the narrative in a sense, right? Like because what he wanted to discuss was his whole bullshit theory, and what you wanted to discuss was what Sky was saying, which is extremely valuable and extremely good to have. And I feel like while he was, I don't know if you could have done things differently, to be honest, because it felt like I guess you were invited to his thing, and he did have this whole thing of controlling it, but I feel like the way it should have gone is where you kind of expose what you do, and then he kind of says his whole bullshit theory, and then you're like, well, I don't know about that, but I know all the other stuff.
Did in the beginning, I feel like he
little
introduced
You
who
yeah,
I
you did
was
in
and
the
the
beginning,
retaliation that I faced and the bailout money. And you know,
100%.
honestly, people might not sit and listen to the whole thing, so I'm glad it got out in the beginning. But I do agree, I could have done a better job in the beginning of like having that pitch.
I wish that
early
I
on.
feel like sometimes when people talk to you, we get the retaliation story before we get the actual why your message. And I wish we can figure a way to reverse it. I want to get to you and your message. Who's this lady? oh, she's she presents as a young woman because she's you look younger than you are, and you're like a young veterinarian who's got a message.
I'm
What's the
actually a
message?
middle-aged cougar veterinarian with a
Cougar
message.
vet. Okay, fine. Then let's put it that way. Then the cougar vet with a message. Okay, what's the message? Oh, well, what's the problem? Oh, you know what I mean? Instead, we always get, oh, poor Crystal. She's got shit on by the AVMA. Who's the AVMA again? We get all that stuff, which is great. Don't get me wrong. But I feel like we need to, like, we're putting the cart before the horse, to use a speciesist term, instead of, I feel like
use your empowerment, because you should feel empowered, Crystal, in your position. I guess that's what Sky is saying, because you do have a lot of power. You are the odd man out, the one who is, in a sense, not necessarily whistleblowing, but you are definitely showing the world the realities behind all what these companies do and how they hide it from the public. And you are trying to get people to think more and realize more of the things that they do. So you are their danger. Like, it's not that they're a danger to you. You are a danger to them.
One of the things that what I really love about Our Honor and you, Crystal, is that you have a message that isn't heard very often. It's a message that I think is really important. But not only that, then you have all this stuff about tactics and strategies that you're interested in, and that you have ideas about how, like, the target market thing on who we outreach. That's a great thing to talk about. Maybe not the first thing to talk about, but that's a wonderful. So you come out like, I have this message. I also have a delivery method to get this message out. And by the way, I have a personal story about how much I've been harmed for speaking about this. Like, I feel like we just need to reverse make it that order instead of the other way around. That's what I think.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Now we got to figure out what's I'm on the evening news, and like, how do we frame this whole thing in a way, like, you can't say like, I am advocating off the bat for animal-free food. Can we say that we're advocating for a redirection of public funds away from animal-based protein to animal-free methods of protein production, for public health, animal welfare, and food security? Like, that message is always kind of dismissed because,
But
she's anti-animal agriculture.
But what do you always tell me, Crystal? You tell me, no, the way we frame it is that we want you to have more choices, and they want you to take away those choices. So that's really your message, is like, I'm here for food choice. And I think that these companies are limiting your food choices to the detriment of all of these animals, and to public health, and to all of these other things.
And to your values.
And against your values. So the first thing is, like, you're being hoodwinked, you're being had. Like what Dave Ramsey always says, that shit, right? You've been had by these fucking credit card companies.
Yeah.
Why? You think you're getting more choice because of them, but actually they're taking you away your freedoms.
Yeah.
Like, that's your message. It's the same thing, except for this, right? Like, you've misplaced your faith in these goddamn companies. They're fucking you, and I've got a way out.
That's a very good way of putting it. Yeah.
Okay.
And they're going to be, well, what's the way out? Because that's the next question has to be, well, what is it? Oh, here comes Crystal with their strategies and tactics. Well, then why aren't you doing it? Well, I am. And here's a backlash that I'm facing from my own things, my own family, soul, company, whatever, industry.
You're basically, in essence, reframing it towards, you are the power. You have the power to show people the truth.
Yeah. Right. No, this is good.
And all of these conspiracy theorists want people like you. They they value a lot of these. Oh, this person is telling me the truth.
She's
oh,
a
wow,
truth
she
teller.
worked for that.
Yes.
Yeah, she's a truth teller.
Yes. You're the truth teller. You're not the little girl who got beaten up by the AVMA. Sometimes when I hear you talking about that right away, I feel like that is not your story, actually. That's part of the story, but that's not the part that you want to lead with. You want to lead with, I'm a badass vet. I'm a cougar vet. I'm a cougar
Leaving
vet.
out
Who's
the
about to
cougar stuff. That's for jokes only. But
I know. I'm a cougar vet who's going to drop truth bombs on you to show
I'm
you how you're
43
getting
years old.
screwed.
I'm older than I look. Why do I look so young? Well, veganism. No.
Right. We'll get to all that. Right. That's where we can get later on in the conversation. If you're on Joe Rogan for 3 hours, right? For 3 hours on Joe Rogan, you get to all that other shit. But if I'm like Crystal's going to be on for 5 minutes or 5 seconds, you know what I mean?
All right, we gotta start pitching to press, and let's workshop this. And because every Costa egg story, every bird flu outbreak story, we need to get on. We need to get the media our statement, and we're happy to be on and be interviewed. What is that going to look like?
I just want to add one more thing, like Crystal. I think like you did a great job, by the way. I think like it's these kind of people, they will derail conversations and try to strongman you into a certain conclusion that they want. So I feel like I don't know if it's strongman. I don't know if that's
strong arm you. Sorry, strong arm you. Yeah, that's the one. Into a certain position. So like I think like you did great. Like but it requires a certain skill set to deal with these kind of people where you're like, I don't have it personally. I think Sky has this kind of skill set for sure, where he knows how to deal with these kind of people. But yeah, it's a skill set that maybe I don't know. You should work more on. I'm sorry to be
And you don't know what you don't know until you go on and you actually try it and test things. And
but I think you did great overall. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
You did. You said no nonsense. Like you didn't. I feel like you could have always just agreed with some of his nonsense or something, but you didn't do that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you pushed back where you could, and I thought it was good.
And the people in the comments think I'm just not trusting him enough, and not,
it's so funny. Yeah, I mean that shows you something, right?
So at least I came across as not totally buying what he was selling, but the people don't like it, and then other people are like, well, you shouldn't have gone on and given him whatever a platform, which I didn't give him a platform, but
he has 100,000 followers. I just checked him or something like that.
Yeah, he's no slouch. He's no slouch. Yeah, he was platforming you.
I was somehow lending legitimacy to his theories, which people in the comments do not think I was. So I was detrimental to the cause, according to. So I don't know.
People say that about everybody, no matter what you do. I mean, I've had people when I was doing more guests, I had that all the time. Anytime I had someone on that people disagreed with, that you platformed him. I'm like, I platformed him? That guy's got way more subscribers than me. What are you talking about? I was lucky to have that person on. Anyway. Thanks everybody. That was great. This is End Stage. We're going to do it again next week, hopefully with a different kind of theme and everything. But the theme is mostly going to be pandemics and stuff. Yeah. Right, Crystal?
Wait, I have one final question. I have one final question, Crystal. Did you get any people follow from him to you?
I think I got a few followers, but obviously not a lot because I didn't come across as, probably what his fans would want.
Still good. That's still a win. That's still a win.
Yeah.
I think you might have opened some mind and planted some seeds to get people out there. Everyone should follow Crystal Heath on. Most people right now are watching on Twitter, actually on X.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we have 127 people watching on X right now.
Can you share your screen and show me how do you find out who's watching?
Do you see the icon with a little eyeball over in your left hand?
Yeah. Oh, I can. Oh, wow.
Just roll over.
My Twitter followers, I guess, are the ones watching. Cool.
Yeah, and the Skyjack Morgan channel on YouTube. So on YouTube, Skyjack Morgan, please subscribe. If you guys are over on X and you want to subscribe to a YouTuber, please check out Skyjack Morgan and also Our Honor and also That Chip Guy on YouTube or The Real Chip Guy on Insta. Actually, you guys can figure out how to find us on Instagram. We're all on Instagram too.
All my Twitter followers, follow us on Instagram and like Our Honor Vets on Instagram, Our Honor Google search Our Honor YouTube because it's complicated what our name is. It's Our Honor and some letters after it. But yeah, follow us there. Like we need more subscribers on our YouTube and Facebook. I'm on Facebook too.
We're on all the Instagrams, Skyjack Morgan, Crystal Heath, and That Chip Guy. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks so much. Talk to you later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.